Hello guys, welcome to The Fiction Wizard. Today we have an incredible story for you. What if Delacour family healer scanned Harry age 10 and found 12 illegal marriage contracts plus 68 compulsion charms by Dumbledore? If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The scan. The thing about Diagon Alley on a Thursday morning in late July was that nobody was paying attention to anybody else. That was what Harry liked about it. He'd slipped away from the Dursleys 40 minutes ago. Uncle Vernon had been busy shouting at a bank teller about exchange rates, Aunt Petunia was dragging Dudley toward a ice cream cart, and Harry had simply not followed. He'd gotten good at that. At being the thing that wasn't noticed when someone stopped looking. He stood now outside Gringotts with his back against the sun-warm marble, watching the alley move. Witches in purple robes arguing over potion ingredients. A boy about his age trailing miserably behind parents who kept stopping to talk to people they knew. An old wizard asleep on a bench with an owl perched on his hat like it owned him. Harry had 3 nuts in his pocket. He'd found them in the crack between the sofa cushions 2 weeks ago and hidden them immediately, the way he hid anything that might be taken. He was trying to decide if 3 nuts bought anything worth buying when the group came around the corner from Nocturne Alley. There were 4 of them. A tall woman in pale gold robes that moved like water, with silver blonde hair pinned up in a way that made her look like she'd stepped out of a painting. Behind her, a girl about 13 with the same hair worn loose and an expression that suggested she found most of the world only marginally interesting. A smaller girl, maybe 8, holding the tall woman's hand and eating a sugar quill with absolute dedication. And a compact, gray-haired man in healer's robes carrying a battered leather bag, who walked slightly ahead of the group like someone used to clearing a path. The woman's accent when she spoke was French and carried the easy authority of someone who had never once doubted that she was worth listening to. Jean-Pierre, we have 40 minutes before the portkey can wait. The healer stopped walking. Harry noticed he'd been looking in Harry's direction for about 15 seconds, which was unusual. People didn't usually look at Harry. Apollon. The woman, Apollon, followed his gaze. Her eyes were an unsettling shade of blue-gray, the kind of color that made you feel like you were being assessed rather than looked at. They landed on Harry and stayed there. Harry straightened instinctively. "What?" she said quietly, to the healer. "I'm not certain." Jean-Pierre was already reaching into his bag. "Give me a moment." "You're always not certain and then you're always very certain very quickly," the older girl said, without looking up from the parchment she'd pulled out of somewhere. "It is exhausting, Monsieur Moreau." "Hush, Fleur." But Apollon was still watching Harry with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. Not pity, he knew what pity looked like and it made his skin crawl. This was something more careful than that. Harry watched the healer pull out what looked like a glass rod about 8 inches long, threaded through with something silver at its core. The man was walking toward him. Harry did not move. He'd learned early that running made things worse. "Hello," the healer said. His accent was also French, but his English was precise and unhurried. "My name is Jean-Pierre Moreau. I am a licensed diagnostic healer. May I ask your name?" "Harry." A pause. "Potter." Something moved across Jean-Pierre's face. A flicker, there and gone. "Harry Potter," the man said carefully. "How old are you?" 10. "Are you here with your family?" Harry thought about Uncle Vernon yelling at the bank teller. "Sort of." Jean-Pierre crouched down slightly so he wasn't towering, which Harry appreciated even if he didn't show it. "Harry, I have a habit, my wife calls it a very annoying habit, of performing basic health scans on children I pass who appear to be unwell. It is purely professional and completely non-invasive. It takes about 30 seconds. He held up the glass rod. "Would you allow me to do that?" "Why do you think I'm unwell?" "Because you are underweight. You have at least 3 healing fractures in your left hand that were never properly treated, and your magical aura has the specific dimming pattern I associate with suppression." Jean-Pierre said this without any particular drama, the way a carpenter might describe the condition of a door. I could be wrong. I am occasionally wrong. But I would feel better knowing. Harry looked at the rod. Looked at the healer's face, which was patient and waiting and not unkind. Looked at the family behind him, the woman with the assessing eyes, the older girl now watching him over her parchment with open curiosity, the little one who had temporarily abandoned her sugar quill. 30 seconds? Harry said. Perhaps 40. I will tell you everything it shows. That was the part that decided it. Adults didn't usually offer to tell Harry things. All right, he said. Jean-Pierre lifted the glass rod and moved it slowly through the air about 6 inches from Harry's body, starting at his head and moving downward. It caught the morning light and threw small prisms across the alley stones. Harry felt nothing except a faint warmth, like standing near a fire. The silver thread inside the rod began to glow. Then it began to glow brighter. Then it began to glow in a way that Harry could tell, even without knowing anything about healing, was not normal. Jean-Pierre's hand had stopped moving. His face had gone very still. He moved the rod back up slowly, then down again, then in a small circle near Harry's temple. The silver light pulsed in a rapid, urgent rhythm. Apollon, Jean-Pierre said, in a voice that was very quiet and very controlled. Come here, please. Apollon was already moving. She crouched beside Jean-Pierre and looked at the rod, and Harry watched the color drain from her face with the speed of someone pulling a tablecloth off a table. Mon Dieu, she said. What? Harry asked. What does it show? Jean-Pierre looked at him directly. It shows a great deal. I want to be certain of my findings before I tell you, because I want to tell you correctly. Can you give me 5 more minutes? You said 30 seconds. I know what I said. The healer's voice was tight in a way that Harry recognized, not anger at Harry, but anger on his behalf, which was a different thing entirely and one he had almost no experience with. I apologize. 5 minutes, and then I will tell you everything. I promise you that. Harry nodded. Fleur had drifted closer without Harry noticing. She was standing 3 feet away, looking at the rod's light with narrowed eyes. Maman, she said softly, in French. That pattern, that is not natural. That is placed. I know, Apollon said, also in French, and then seemed to remember that Harry was standing there. She switched back to English. Forgive us. She studied him with that careful expression. Has anyone ever performed a medical scan on you before, Harry? No. Has a healer ever examined you? At all? I don't think so. She and Jean-Pierre exchanged a look that communicated several paragraphs in about half a second. Jean-Pierre stood and reached into his bag, pulling out a different instrument, a flat disc of pale blue crystal that he held horizontally, and spoke a word over in low Latin. The crystal lit up in sections, like a stained-glass window catching dawn light, and he studied it with an expression of increasing, controlled fury. Harry, he said at last. I told you I would tell you everything, and I will. But I need to ask you, are you somewhere safe? Is there someone I can contact on your behalf? I live with my aunt and uncle. Are they good to you? Harry looked at the man's face. There was something in it. Not the nervous look adults got when they were about to tell him something and then not tell him something, but a kind of weighted seriousness, like a man about to lift something heavy. Like he was bracing. They're fine, Harry said, because that was what he always said. Jean-Pierre looked at him for a long moment. I see. He glanced at Apollon, who gave him a short nod. He crouched again so they were at eye level, which Harry was starting to realize was something this man did deliberately, as a choice, and that choice meant something. Harry, I have been a diagnostic healer for 32 years. I have seen magical manipulation. I have seen illegal enchantments. I have, twice in my career, seen evidence of criminal magical violations on children. He paused. What I am seeing now is worse than any of those. The alley noise continued around them, vendor calls and owl hoots and the distant sound of the leaky cauldron's door swinging, and Harry stood in the middle of it and felt something cold and very clear settle into the pit of his stomach. How bad? He asked. I have found 12 illegal marriage contracts bound to your magical signature, Jean-Pierre said. Steady. Precise. Not softening it. They are binding agreements made without your consent or knowledge, attached to your magical core in a way that would have begun to influence your decision-making as you grew older without you ever knowing they were there. Several of them predate your current age significantly. The oldest appears to have been placed when you were approximately 18 months old. Harry stared at him. Marriage contracts. Yes. I'm 10. Yes. That is why they are illegal. Jean-Pierre's voice was professionally level, but his jaw was tight. They are also illegal because they were placed without the knowledge or consent of your magical guardian, whoever that would be. That's Dumbledore, Harry said. He'd heard the name often enough, from letters the Dursleys received occasionally and threw away, from whispers in this very alley any time someone recognized the scar on his forehead. Albus Dumbledore. He's my magical guardian. The silence that fell was the specific kind of silence that happens when several people know something and are deciding how to say it. Harry, Jean-Pierre said. He took a breath. The marriage contracts are not the entirety of what the scan found. What else? 68 compulsion charms. The healer said it the same way he'd said everything else, directly, without softening, because he'd apparently decided that Harry deserved that. Of varying complexity and age. The earliest were placed before your first birthday. They are woven across multiple areas of your cognitive function, decision-making, emotional response, the formation of loyalty and trust. Some appear designed to create aversion. Others appear designed to create attraction, not romantic attraction, he added quickly, but the kind that makes a person instinctively trust, instinctively follow. Who placed them? Harry asked. Another one of those looks between Jean-Pierre and Apollon. This one lasted longer. The majority, Jean-Pierre said carefully, bear the same magical signature. Whose? Apollon spoke before the healer could. Her voice was even, but there was something running under it like a current under ice. The compulsion charms, Harry, most of them, bear the signature of Albus Dumbledore. Harry had been cold in the pit of his stomach since Jean-Pierre had said marriage contracts. Now the cold went all the way through him, steady and thorough, like stepping into deep water. He stood with it. He looked at the blue crystal disc, still lit up in its sections, and he thought about the portraits of Dumbledore he'd seen in Madame Malkin's, the smiling face on the famous wizard's card Dudley had left on the kitchen table once. Long white beard. Half-moon glasses. Greatest wizard of the age, the card had said. The compulsion charms, Harry said slowly. They're on me right now. Yes. And they've been affecting how I think. Yes. Since before I was 1 year old. The earliest ones, yes. Harry looked at his own hands. He thought about every time he'd felt inexplicably calm about something terrible. Every time he'd thought, with a kind of hazy acceptance, well, it could be worse. Every time he'd shied away from asking questions he'd later realized he should have asked. He looked back up at Jean-Pierre. How do I fix it? He said. Apollon made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite something else. Her expression had shifted into something that looked a great deal like respect. Jean-Pierre blinked once. Then the corner of his mouth moved. That, he said, is exactly the right question. They found a private room at the Leaky Cauldron. Apollon said something to Tom the barman in a tone that didn't leave room for a response, and suddenly there was a room, and tea, and nobody was coming to check on them. Gabrielle had fallen asleep on a bench with the sugar quill still in her hand. Fleur sat across the table from Harry with her parchment put away and her full attention on him, which was the kind of attention that felt like being examined rather than watched. Harry didn't mind it. He was used to people looking past him. Being looked at was strange but not uncomfortable. "You are not frightened," Fleur said. It was not a question. Should I be? She considered that. Most people would be. Being frightened doesn't seem useful right now. The corner of her mouth curved slightly. "Non. I suppose it does not." Jean-Pierre was at the table's far end, working through calculations in a leather-bound notebook, occasionally muttering to himself in French. He had a second crystal rod laid out, longer than the first, amber-colored, and he was cross-referencing whatever it had told him with a thick reference text he'd pulled from his bag. The bag, Harry had noticed, appeared to be bottomless. He'd pulled 7 books out of it in the last 10 minutes. Apollon set a cup of tea in front of Harry. "Drink." "I'm fine." "You have been told that you have been magically manipulated since infancy by one of the most powerful wizards alive," Apollon said pleasantly. "Drink the tea." Harry drank the tea. It was very good tea, which somehow made him trust her slightly more, because bad tea was the sort of thing people who didn't actually care about you made. "I need to understand something," Harry said. "The compulsion charms, if they've been on me my whole life, how do I know what I actually think? How do I know what I actually want?" Apollon sat down across from him. "You don't," she said. "Not yet. That is the honest answer." "How do you remove them?" Jean-Pierre will explain the specifics. The short version is that there is a cleansing ritual. It is not simple and not painless, but it is thorough. It requires consent, which is why Dumbledore could not have it reversed without your knowing. She paused. It also requires witnesses, which is why we are here. You just met me an hour ago. Yes. She looked at him steadily. And in that hour I have learned that a 10-year-old child has had his mind systematically altered by someone who was supposed to protect him, that his body shows evidence of malnutrition and untreated injuries, and that he has 12 marriage contracts attached to his magical core like anchors. I did not need longer than an hour. Why do you care? Harry asked. He wasn't being rude. He genuinely wanted to know. Apollon was quiet for a moment. My daughters are a quarter vila, she said. Do you know what that means? Not really. It means that for most of their lives, powerful people will try to own them. Contract them. Bind them to houses and bloodlines through arrangements they never consented to, because they have value in the old family's eyes, and value, in that world, means something to be traded. Her voice was calm and her eyes were not. When Jean-Pierre looked at that crystal and I saw what it showed, I did not see a famous child. I saw a child who had been owned before he was old enough to walk. That is something I understand. Harry looked at his tea. Right, he said quietly. The marriage contracts, Fleur said, leaning forward slightly. Do you know which families? Jean-Pierre is identifying them, Apollon said. But we should discuss, Parkinson, Greengrass, Bones, Davis, Abbott, Macmillan, Yaxley, Knott, Crabbe, Goyle, Folly, and Flint, Jean-Pierre said from the end of the table, without looking up. In order of binding strength. The Yaxley, Knott, Crabbe, and Goyle contracts are the most recent. They appear to have been added within the last 3 years, after the original 8. The 4 newer ones are also the most clumsily done. Different methodology. Possible second party. A second party placed contracts on me too? Harry said. Possibly. Someone who knew the original contracts existed and wanted to add to them, or someone who placed contracts independently and was working in concert. Jean-Pierre finally looked up. The first 8 contracts appear to have been placed through your family's magical stewardship. Someone with legal access to your magical family registry placed them. That requires either the signature of your parents, which is impossible, or the signature of your magical guardian. Dumbledore, Harry said. That would be the implication, yes. Harry was quiet for a moment, turning the teacup in his hands. The compulsion charms, he said. What were they for? What was he trying to make me do? Jean-Pierre set down his pen. He looked at Harry with the expression of a man about to deliver a careful, considered answer to a question that deserved one. Some charms appear designed to inhibit independent decision-making, to make you more likely to accept authority, follow instruction, defer to those designated as guides or mentors. Others appear designed specifically to create aversion to certain types of research, particularly into your own history and family legacy. A pause. There are also two specific charms that appear designed to create attachment, deep, instinctive, irrational attachment, to anyone who presents themselves as a father figure. Anyone who is warm, who offers guidance, who positions themselves as the wise elder. The cup was very still in Harry's hands. He was trying to make me trust him, Harry said. Specifically trust him. That is my professional assessment, yes. And the marriage contracts, those are financial. Those are about money and alliances. The Potter family, Apollon said, holds 2 seats on the Wisengamot, significant land holdings in Scotland and Ireland, a vault at Gringotts that has been accumulating interest for 11 generations, and political alliances with 7 major European magical families. The marriage contracts would redirect portions of that wealth and influence to the contracting families upon your legal majority. She said it plainly, not cruelly. You are not only famous, Harry. You are enormously wealthy and politically powerful. Or you should be. Those things can be controlled by controlling who you marry. And the compulsion charms would make me more likely to go along with whatever Dumbledore told me, Harry said. Including who to marry. Yes. He set the teacup down. He was building a puppet. Nobody said anything. A very specific kind of puppet, Harry continued, and his voice was level and his hands were steady and there was something in his eyes that was not anger, exactly, but was what anger becomes when it's had time to compress and clarify. One that thought it was making its own choices. One that would fight Voldemort because it wanted to, not because it was told to, but that would do exactly what he needed it to do when it mattered. And afterwards he'd have a hero who owed him everything and would vote the way he said in the Wisengamot and have children with the families he'd contracted and consolidate his political position for another generation. The room was quiet. Fleur was staring at him. Apollon's expression had something in it that Harry couldn't name. You are 10 years old, Fleur said, very quietly. I grew up fast, Harry said. Jean-Pierre cleared his throat. It is important that we discuss what happens next, and discuss it in terms of what you want, Harry. Not what we think you should do. Not what is strategically optimal. What do you want? Harry looked at him. He thought about the question seriously, the way he thought about things he hadn't been asked to think about before, turning it over, looking at it from different sides. I want the charms off, he said. I want the contracts dissolved. I want to know what my family actually is, what they actually left me, what they actually stood for. And I want to know everything that was hidden from me. He paused. And then I want to decide what to do with that. Myself. Jean-Pierre nodded slowly. Those are achievable goals. The charms first, Apollon said. Everything else becomes cleaner once those are removed. You cannot make fully informed decisions while they are in place. How long does the cleansing ritual take? 2 days of preparation, half a day for the ritual itself, Jean-Pierre said. It will need to be done in a controlled environment. Our townhouse in London would serve, I have a proper healing space there. I'd need to get away from my aunt and uncle. That, Apollon said, and something in her voice had gone precise and cool in the way that very refined people get when they are genuinely angry but too well-bred to shout about it, is something I can arrange. Do your aunt and uncle know you're here today? Not exactly. Do they know what you are? They know I'm a wizard. They hate it. Apollon looked at him for a moment. And they are your legal Muggle guardians. Yes. We will need to address that as well. She glanced at Jean-Pierre. My report will include the evidence of physical neglect. That goes to the ICW's Child Welfare Office as well as the British Ministry. Will that make things complicated? Harry asked. It will make things, Apollon said, considerably more complicated for Albus Dumbledore, which is exactly the correct outcome. She stood. For tonight, Harry, you will stay with us. I will send word to your aunt and uncle that you are under the care of a licensed healer, which is legally sufficient under both Muggle and magical law for an emergency medical hold. They cannot contest it. She paused. They will probably be relieved. Harry thought about that, and thought she was probably right, and found he had very little feeling about it either way. Maman, said Gabrielle from the bench, without opening her eyes, can Harry have the room next to mine? Go to sleep, Gabrielle. I am asleep. But can he? Yes, Apollon said, and Harry watched her expression soften for a moment in a way that it hadn't softened for anyone else. He can. The Delacour townhouse was on a quiet street in Kensington that Harry had walked past approximately 40 times in his life without being able to see it. Apollon said something under her breath at the front door and it shifted from a nondescript brick frontage into a 3-story house with iron window boxes and a blue door, and Harry stood on the pavement and looked at it. Fidelius, he asked. Apollon looked at him. You know about the Fidelius charm? I read, Harry said. Something moved across her face, brief, warm. No. Layered concealment charms. More subtle than Fidelius and harder to break. She pushed the door open. Come in. The inside was exactly what the outside suggested it would be once you could see it, warm, slightly cluttered with books and bottles and something that smelled like herbs and wood smoke, with French landscape paintings on the walls and a black cat asleep on the stairs who opened one eye when they entered and closed it again. It was the sort of house that felt like it had opinions about its occupants and approved of them. Harry followed them in and the door closed behind him and he stood in the hallway with the sound of Gabrielle running upstairs and Fleur's steps more measured behind her and the distant sound of someone in the kitchen, and he felt something he didn't immediately have a name for. Safe, he thought after a moment. The house felt safe. He wasn't sure he'd felt that anywhere before. Jean-Pierre had gone straight to what was clearly his workroom, a door off the main hallway that smelled strongly of antiseptic and dried herbs, and Harry followed him while Apollon went to the kitchen. The healer was already laying things out on a long stone table, crystals, copper instruments, a glass bowl filled with a liquid that moved without being touched. Tomorrow morning, Jean-Pierre said, not looking up, I will begin the preparation work for the cleansing ritual. Tonight, I want to give you something to counteract the most acute compulsion layers, not remove them, but dull them enough that you can think more clearly about your own situation. It's a potion. It will taste terrible. That's fine, Harry said. It will also give you a headache for several hours. Also fine. Jean-Pierre looked at him. You take a remarkable amount of things in stride. I've had a lot of practice. The healer was quiet for a moment, measuring something pale green into a phial. The abuse your body shows signs of, he said, with the same steady directness he'd used all day, your aunt and uncle? Mostly neglect, Harry said. They don't hit me. They just don't care very much. The fractures in your hand. That was Dudley. My cousin. He was going through a phase. Jean-Pierre set down the measuring spoon. He did not look at Harry with pity, which Harry was grateful for. He looked at him with the expression of a man cataloguing something in a way that meant it would not be forgotten. I will include everything in my report, Jean-Pierre said. All of it. I know. Harry looked at the glass bowl with the moving liquid. Dr. Moreau. The ritual tomorrow, removing the charms. Will I be different after? Jean-Pierre considered the question genuinely. You will be yourself, he said. For possibly the first time. That can be disorienting. It can also be, he searched for the word. Clarifying. In what way? In the way that removing a stone from your boot clarifies walking, Jean-Pierre said. He handed over the pale green phial. Drink this. All of it. Harry drank it. It tasted like pond water mixed with burnt rubber and something that might have once been a vegetable. That's awful, Harry said. Yes, Jean-Pierre agreed. Now go eat something. Apollon will be offended if you don't eat. Apollon had made soup, or someone had. Harry suspected it might have been magical, because it appeared on the table fully formed and steaming while Apollon was still reading something at the counter. Fleur was already eating, reading her parchment again. Gabrielle had somehow acquired a new sugar quill from somewhere and was regarding Harry across the table with the open, unfiltered curiosity of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned to pretend she wasn't looking. You are very thin, Gabrielle observed. Gabrielle, Apollon said. I am only saying what is true. Eat your soup. Harry sat down and ate the soup, which was good in a way that suggested actual cooking rather than magic. He was 2 bowls in before he realized he'd been served without asking, without negotiating, without making himself small enough to be allowed to eat. It sat oddly, like a muscle remembering how to stretch. Can I ask you something? He said to Apollon. Yes. Why is a French family in London in late July? Apollon set down her spoon. My husband has business at the ministry. The British Ministry of Magic. She paused. He is a diplomat. He works with the Department of International Magical Cooperation. Is he here? He arrives tomorrow. She studied Harry's face. He will want to meet you. He knows about what Jean-Pierre found. I contacted him while you were with the healer. What did he say? He said, and I am translating generously, that he was going to have several very pointed conversations with several very important people. A pause. My husband is a calm man. When he uses words like pointed, it means something specific. Harry nodded. He looked at his soup. He thought about Dumbledore's face on that chocolate frog card and tried to feel something about it, tried to find the instinctive trust, the warmth, the inclination to excuse and accept that had always been there when he thought about the headmaster, and found that the pale green potion had done something to it, thinned it out, the way morning light thins shadows. What was underneath the thin shadow was not anger, or not only anger. It was something that felt like the moment before a decision. A threshold. The marriage contracts, Harry said. Dissolving them. Will the families contest it? Some will, Apollon said. The ones with dark-leaning politics will have the most to lose and will be the most aggressive. The others may accept dissolution quietly if given appropriate incentive. What kind of incentive? There are several options. We can discuss them once the cleansing ritual is complete and you can think through them without interference. I'd rather start thinking now. He looked at her steadily. The compulsion charms are dulled, not gone. My mind is my own enough. And I've been being moved around a chessboard my whole life without being told the game was happening. I'd like to start understanding the board. Fleur had looked up from her parchment. Apollon looked at Harry for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, with the expression of someone revising an assumption. Very well, she said. After dinner. We will start with the Wiesengemot structure and the Potter family's political holdings, so you have context for everything else. Thank you, Harry said. Don't thank me yet, Apollon said. It is a great deal of information and you are 10 years old and it is 9 in the evening. I don't need much sleep, Harry said. That, Fleur said, setting down her parchment and pulling her chair slightly closer to the table with the focused expression of someone who had decided something was going to be interesting, is very convenient. Gabrielle beamed at Harry across the table with the expression of someone who had already decided he was going to stay. Harry ate his soup and felt the pale green potion working quietly through him like water finding its level, and outside the London night pressed against the kitchen windows, and somewhere across the city Albus Dumbledore was presumably asleep, or at the ministry, or doing whatever it was the greatest wizard of the age did with his Thursday evenings. He had no idea yet what was coming. Harry thought about that. He thought about it quite calmly, and he finished his soup, and he waited for Apollon to begin. Chapter 2, The Weight of Names. The headache hit at midnight. Harry had been warned, so he didn't panic when it arrived, just a deep, grinding pressure behind his eyes that built slowly, like someone tightening a bolt, and he lay on his back in the guest room with his hands flat on the mattress and breathed through it. The room was small and clean and had a window that looked out over a garden that was doing better than any garden the Dursleys had ever owned, and there was a lamp on the bedside table that Apollon had shown him how to dim, and the bed was softer than anything he'd slept on in recent memory. He focused on those things. The lamp. The garden. The mattress. The headache was the potion working. Jean-Pierre had explained it in terms Harry mostly followed. The compulsion charms were layered like sediment and the potion worked like water through cracks, not removing but loosening, creating space between the charm work and the actual tissue of his thinking. It would hurt because the charms had been there so long that his mind had grown around them, the way a tree grows around a nail. He thought about that metaphor and found it made him angry in a clean, useful way. Around 2 in the morning the pressure peaked and then receded, and Harry lay in the dark and waited to see what was left. What was left was quieter. That was the only word for it. Like a room after a television is switched off, when you suddenly realize how much noise there had been. He lay in that quiet and tested it carefully, the way you test ice before walking on it. He thought about Dumbledore. He waited for the reflex, the warm inclination, the sense of safety, the instinct to trust. The things he'd always assumed were just how he felt. There was nothing. Not hostility. Just nothing. A neutral space where manufactured feeling had been. He thought about the Dursleys. He waited for the dim, hazy acceptance he'd always felt about them, the sense that well, they do their best, they did take me in, it could be worse. The things he'd always assumed were just being fair. Nothing there either. Just the plain fact of what they were, sitting in the light without shadow. Harry stared at the ceiling for a while. Then he got up, because lying in the dark with his thoughts was going to be less useful than doing something, and he padded quietly to the desk in the corner where Apollon had left him a stack of parchment and a quill and a list of books she'd pulled from the townhouse shelves. She'd said, "Start with the top 2. Don't try to read everything tonight." Which was almost certainly why he started with the top 3. The Political Structure of Wizarding Britain, a comprehensive guide to the Wizengamot and hereditary seats, dry as chalk but precise, and Harry had always found precision more comforting than warmth when it came to information. The Noble and Most Ancient Houses, Lineage, Law, and Legacy, much more interesting, because it turned out his family had a history that went back to before the Statute of Secrecy and included several people who had clearly been absolutely furious at various points in history, which Harry found he related to. Wizarding contract law, binding agreements, magical oaths, and their limitations, this one was the most immediately useful. He was halfway through it when the sky outside the window started to go gray. He was on page 147, taking notes in his neat, cramped handwriting, when the door opened quietly and Fleur appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea and an expression suggesting she was entirely unsurprised to find him awake. "Maman said you would be up," she said, and set 1 cup on the desk. She was right. Harry looked at the tea, then at Fleur. "Why are you up?" Fleur shrugged in the way the French shrug, which communicated several things at once. "I do not sleep well in London. The city is too loud." She looked at the books on the desk. "How far have you gotten?" "Through most of the contract law. The Wizengamot structure I already mostly understand, the hereditary seats, the appointed seats, how votes work." He tapped the Noble Houses book. "This one is the most useful for the contracts. There's a clause under the pre-majority agreement section, you can challenge illegal contracts through the ICW's Magical Contracts Tribunal without going through the British Ministry at all. Fleur pulled up the chair from the corner and sat. Why is that relevant? Because Dumbledore controls a significant portion of the British Ministry's legal process, Harry said. He's chief warlock of the Wizengamot. If we go through the British Ministry, everything we file goes past people who will tell him. He met her eyes. But the ICW's tribunal is international. He has influence there, but not the same kind. Fleur studied him with that examining look that he was starting to understand was simply how she engaged with things she found interesting. You have been awake all night reading contract law. Is that strange? You are 10. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being surprising. But she didn't sound like it was a complaint. She sounded like someone recalibrating an expectation, which was more interesting. The ICW tribunal. They would need grounds. Illegal binding without guardian consent. Dumbledore is listed as my magical guardian. He gave the consent. For contracts you did not know existed. Yes, but legally, Harry flipped back several pages. Here. A magical guardian acting in loco parentis may not enter binding agreements that materially restrict the ward's future freedom of association, matrimonial choice, or political inheritance without independent verification by a second party of Wizengamot standing or equivalent. None of these contracts have that second verification. They were filed unilaterally. He looked up. That makes them legally void under ICW statute. The question is just whether the families will accept the dissolution quietly or fight it. Fleur leaned over and looked at the page. She was quiet for a moment. The dark-aligned families, not Yaxley, Crabbe, Goyle, they will not dissolve quietly. No. They'll claim the contracts are valid and try to tie it up in tribunal for as long as possible, because the longer it stays in tribunal the longer I'm technically under contract and they have a claim on my family's political alignment. Harry turned his teacup in his hands. Which is why we need to file everything simultaneously and move fast. If even one contract is still technically active when I turn 17, they can argue partial validity and try to enforce it. How do you know about magical maturity and contract enforcement? Harry pointed at the book. Fleur's mouth curved. Fair. They sat in the pre-dawn quiet for a moment, the city outside starting its slow gray awakening. Can I ask you something? Harry said. You have been asking things all night from what I can see, Fleur said. Yes. The Vila thing, being a quarter Vila. You said people try to contract you. Has it happened? Fleur's expression shifted slightly. Not hurt, more like someone touching a bruise to see how much it still aches. There have been approaches. Through my father's diplomatic channels. Discussions. The word had a specific weight. My mother ended them. How? With great clarity and some legal threats, Fleur said. And once, memorably, by making a family's eldest son levitate 3 feet off the ground in the middle of the French ministry atrium until he understood that the discussion was over. Harry stared at her. She can do that? My mother is a full Vila in terms of her gifts. The blonde hair and the charm is the surface of it. Fleur's voice was matter-of-fact. The fire aspect is significant. Harry filed that information carefully. She's on my side, then. She is very much on your side. Fleur looked at him directly. She was angry, Harry. When Jean-Pierre showed her the full scan. She was very controlled about it, but I know what she looks like when she is angry, and she was. A pause. She has been making Fleur calls since 10 o'clock last night. To who? People who matter. Fleur stood, collecting her tea. My father arrives at 9. And then things will begin to move quickly, I think. She looked at him once more from the doorway, considering, direct. Get dressed before 7. Jean-Pierre will want to begin the preparation work and you should eat first. Right. Harry looked back at his notes. Fleur. She paused. Thank you, he said. For the tea. And for this. He gestured vaguely at the books, the conversation, the fact of being somewhere that felt like people were taking him seriously. Fleur looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't quite read. Do not thank me, she said. Just don't waste it. And then she was gone down the hallway, and Harry looked at his notes, and added 3 more lines before he went to get dressed. Jean-Pierre's preparation work involved approximately 12 different instruments, a ritual circle drawn in something silver on the stone floor of his workroom, and an unbroken 3-hour lecture on what the cleansing ritual would involve, what it would feel like, what the risks were, and what Harry needed to understand before consenting to it. Harry sat on a stool in the middle of the ritual circle and listened to all of it without interrupting. He asked 4 questions, all of which Jean-Pierre answered with approving thoroughness. Then he signed a consent form in his own blood. Jean-Pierre explained this was a formal healing consent, not a magical binding, and showed him the difference, and the healer began the actual preparation work, which involved placing temporary stabilizing charms on each of the 68 compulsion points identified by yesterday's scan. Does it hurt? Harry asked, as Jean-Pierre worked through the 4th charm. The preparation? No. The ritual will. Jean-Pierre moved the copper instrument carefully. I want to be honest with you about that. Some of these charms have been part of your cognitive architecture for nearly a decade. Removing them will feel like pulling something that has become embedded. There will be several hours of significant disorientation after the ritual is complete. But they'll be gone. Completely and permanently gone, yes. And the person who placed them won't know they've been removed? Jean-Pierre paused in his work. Not immediately. The charms were designed to be self-maintaining, they don't report back to the caster the way some monitoring spells do. It may be some time before he notices the difference in your behavior. He resumed. But he will notice eventually. Good, Harry said, and there was something in his tone that made Jean-Pierre look at him once, and then continue working without comment. Etienne Delacour arrived at 8:57, which suggested he was either someone who valued precision or someone who had caught the 9 o'clock port key as planned. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with Fleur's coloring but none of the Vila shimmer, just a solid, direct presence, the kind of man who took up space in a room not through intimidation but through simple certainty of purpose. He kissed Apollon once, lifted Gabrielle off the ground while she shrieked with laughter, nodded at Fleur, and then turned to Harry with the expression of a man who had spent the last 10 hours on international flu calls and had arrived at a specific conclusion. Harry Potter, he said, and shook Harry's hand like he was meeting an adult. My name is Etienne. I work in international magical diplomacy, which means I know a great deal about how things can be done through proper channels and how those channels can be made to move considerably faster than usual. He sat down across the kitchen table. My wife told me what Jean-Pierre found. I have some things to tell you. All right, Harry said. Firstly, Gringotts. The Potter family vaults have been under a sealed estate management order since your parents died. This is normal for minor heirs. What is not normal is that the order has been renewed every 2 years by a magical guardian signature, which has prevented you from accessing them or from receiving the reports that the estate manager, a goblin named Ragnok, has been filing quarterly for 9 years. Etienne's voice was even and measured. Ragnok has apparently been waiting for this. When I contacted Gringotts this morning, I was told that the senior account manager has been flagging the estate status for review for the last 3 years, and that he would very much like to meet with Lord Potter at his earliest convenience. Lord Potter, Harry said. You hold the Potter lordship by right of inheritance. It activated when you turned 10, that's the age of cognizance under wizarding inheritance law, the age at which a minor lord can begin to access information about their estate, though not legally control it until 17. Etienne paused. Someone filed a cognizance suppression order to prevent that activation. Dumbledore, Harry said. The signature on the suppression order was Dumbledore's, yes. Harry was quiet for a moment. Then, and the Black Lordship? Something shifted slightly in Etienne's expression. That's more complicated. You are aware of Sirius Black? The murderer. He escaped Azkaban. Harry had seen the newspaper coverage 2 years ago. He is your godfather, Etienne said. And he was convicted without a trial. The kitchen was very still. Without a trial, Harry repeated. No trial, no Veritaserum interrogation, no formal charges. He was placed in Azkaban directly by Bartemius Crouch Sr. under wartime emergency powers. Etienne's voice remained measured, but his eyes were not. He has been there for 9 years. Harry thought about that. He thought about it carefully and thoroughly, without the haze that would have been there yesterday, the instinctive acceptance of official facts, the reluctance to question authority that he now understood had been placed there deliberately. If he was never tried, Harry said slowly, then he was never convicted. Legally. Correct. Then legally he might be innocent. That is a question that requires investigation. I have begun making inquiries. Etienne glanced at Apollon. There is a record of the arrest. There is almost no record of the circumstances. The incident report is 3 lines long, which for a supposed mass murderer is extraordinarily brief. He laced his fingers on the table. I am not saying he is innocent. I am saying the case was never properly examined, and that a man who was never tried cannot legally be considered guilty. Harry looked at the table. He thought about a godfather he'd never known existed, because that was another thing that had probably been managed, wasn't it? The instinctive acceptance that there was no one, that the Dursleys were the only option, that there was nothing and no one from his parents' world who might have wanted him. If he were exonerated, Harry said, and if I wanted to live with him, that would be a legal possibility, yes. Your guardianship would transfer. Dumbledore would lose his guardianship status. Yes. And all the contracts filed under his guardianship authority would become open to challenge on the grounds of fraudulent authority, Etienne said. Yes. Harry. A pause. You understand what I am telling you. You're telling me that Sirius Black's exoneration and my guardianship transfer are connected to dissolving the marriage contracts, Harry said. You're telling me that if I can establish his innocence, it collapses the legal foundation for almost everything Dumbledore did while claiming to be my guardian. Etienne looked at him for a moment. How long were you awake last night? Most of it. And you read, contract law, Wiesengemot structure, noble house inheritance. Harry paused. And about 200 pages of the Noble and Most Ancient Houses book. The Potters had a really interesting legal dispute in 1743 that's almost directly relevant to, we will visit Gringotts this afternoon, Etienne said, and he was almost smiling. Ragnarok is expecting us. He apparently has 9 years of quarterly reports to give you. Gringotts at midday had the specific smell of old stone and something metallic and slightly foreboding that Harry had noticed on every prior visit and had never been able to name. He walked through the white marble entrance beside Etienne with the slight surreal feeling of visiting a place you've been before but seeing it differently, the way a room looks different when the lights are on. The goblin at the main counter looked at Harry, looked at Etienne, and disappeared without a word. A minute later a second goblin, older, sharper, with the kind of face that had spent decades being simultaneously intelligent and unimpressed, appeared from a door to the left and beckoned them through. The room they were shown to was not a visitor's room. It was an account manager's private office, all dark wood and organized parchment work and a fire that burned in a color slightly off from orange, and Ragnarok settled behind his desk and looked at Harry with the expression of someone who had been waiting for an appointment for a long time and was not going to waste it now that it had arrived. Lord Potter, Ragnarok said. His English was precise and unaccented. I have been your family's account manager for 31 years. I managed your grandfather's estate, your father's estate, and I have been managing yours since November of 1981. A brief pause. I have a significant amount of information to share with you. Some of it will be unpleasant. That seems to be a theme today, Harry said. Ragnarok looked at him for a moment with something that was not quite surprise. Yes, the goblin said. I expect it is. He reached below the desk and produced a folder of parchment that was at least 4 inches thick. I will begin with your vaults. The Potter estate, Harry learned over the following 2 hours, was considerably larger than significant. His family held 3 vaults, the Trust Vault, set up for his personal use before Hogwarts, which was the one he'd been taken to on his brief visit 18 months ago and which contained enough to see him through school comfortably. The main vault, which contained 11 generations of accumulated wealth in galleons, gems, magical artifacts, and various financial instruments, and which was worth a number that made Harry sit very still for a moment when Ragnarok named it. And the Legacy Vault, sealed to the Potter Lordship ring and containing primarily documents, heirlooms, and items of political and historical significance. The Trust Vault is the only one you have been given access to, Ragnarok said. Access to the others was blocked by the Estate Management Order. I have been filing challenges to the suppression order for 3 years. His tone was precise, but there was something underneath it. They have been denied at the ministry level each time. I have the records of those denials and the signature of the official who issued them. Whose signature? Etienne asked. Ragnarok slid a document across the desk. Etienne looked at it. Harry looked at it. The signature at the bottom of the denial form was neat, unhurried, and very familiar from 100 newspaper photographs. Harry looked at it for 3 seconds and then moved on. The Legacy Vault, what's in it that's relevant to the current situation? Ragnarok's expression shifted very slightly in a way that Harry was starting to read as approval. Your father's will, the goblin said, which names Sirius Black as your primary guardian and provides specific instructions for your care. A detailed accounting of the Potter family's political alliances and hereditary obligations. And, Ragnarok reached into the folder, a list of known marriage contracts that your grandfather filed a preemptive legal block against in 1978, anticipating exactly this kind of manipulation. Your father never activated the block because he did not know it was there. It was filed as a dormant protective measure. A preemptive block, Harry said. So my grandfather expected someone might try to contract me without consent. Your grandfather Fleamont Potter, Ragnarok said, was a man of considerable foresight and limited patience for political maneuvering at his family's expense. He filed the block specifically because he was aware that the Potter name and wealth made his potential grandchildren a target. A pause that was just long enough to be meaningful. The block would invalidate any marriage contract filed without direct Potter family consent as defined by patrilineal lordship succession. My fathers will name Sirius Black as guardian, Harry said. But Sirius was arrested. So who has lordship succession? As the sole living Potter by direct line, you do, Ragnarok said. At the age of 10, under the cognizance provision of inheritance law, you are entitled to act in your own interest in legal matters with appropriate adult representation. He looked at Etienne. I understand Monsieur Delacour has agreed to serve in that capacity for the present proceedings. Yes, Etienne said. Then. Ragnarok reached under the desk and produced a small wooden box, dark with age, with a brass clasp. Lord Potter, the Potter Lordship ring. It has been waiting in this vault since your father's death. He set the box on the desk. You are entitled to claim it. Harry looked at the box. He looked at it with the same careful stillness he'd been using all day, the thing that wasn't hesitation but was more like respect for the wait of a moment. He opened the box. The ring was gold, darker than current fashion gold, with a crest set into a flat shield-shaped face, a griffin's head, and 4 stars around it, and something engraved along the inner band that he couldn't read without holding it to the light. He picked it up and held it up and read, Audentes Fortuna Juvat. Fortune favors the bold. He put it on. It resized immediately, settling onto his right index finger, and there was a brief warm pulse against his skin, just once, like a heartbeat, like something confirming something. Ragnarok looked at Harry's right hand and nodded once, with the gravity of ceremony. "There is one more thing," the goblin said. He reached into the folder and withdrew a single sealed envelope, the seal showing the Potter crest in red wax. "This was placed in your legacy vault by your father 1 month before his death. He left instructions that it was to be given directly to you when you claimed the ring. Not before. Not to anyone else." Ragnarok's eyes were very steady. "It has never been opened. Not by your guardian, not by anyone." Harry took the envelope. He looked at the seal. He thought about James Potter sealing this envelope 30 days before he died, 30 days before Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow, knowing, or suspecting, or hoping, that someday Harry would sit in this chair and read whatever was inside. He broke the seal. The letter inside was 3 pages, written in a handwriting that was slightly messy and very warm, and it started, "Harry, if you're reading this, you found the ring, which means you're old enough to need it. Good lad." Harry read it slowly and completely. Etienne and Ragnarok waited without speaking, with the specific patience of people who understand that some things require the time they require. When he finished, he set the letter down on the desk and sat with it for a moment. Then he looked at Ragnarok. "My father knew," Harry said. "He knew someone might try to manipulate my guardianship. He writes about it specifically. He names possible threats." He paused. "He doesn't name Dumbledore directly. But he writes about being worried about the people who might want to use me as a symbol, and about anyone who might try to build a destiny around me rather than letting me choose one." "Your father was a perceptive man," Ragnarok said quietly. "He also writes about Sirius Black. About trusting him completely." Harry looked at the ring on his hand. "And he writes that if anything has happened to Sirius, if Sirius is gone or in trouble, that the first thing I should do is find out why." "That," Etienne said carefully, "is very much what we intend to do." "I want his trial records," Harry said. "Everything. I want to know what evidence was used, who authorized the imprisonment, what was filed and what wasn't." He looked at Ragnarok. "Can Gringotts pull that? Through your legal archive access?" Ragnarok showed his teeth. It was not precisely a smile, but it was close. "The Gringotts Legal Archive has copies of all ministry filings going back 400 years, he said. "The Sirius Black imprisonment documentation, all 3 pages of it, has been sitting in our system since November 1981, flagged for your account." He paused. "I have also taken the liberty of noting several significant anomalies in the process. I am prepared to provide a formal Gringotts attestation of those anomalies for use in any legal proceeding." "A Gringotts attestation carries weight at the ICW," Etienne said. "Considerable weight," Ragnarok agreed, with the tone of someone understating something. Harry looked at the letter. He looked at the ring. He thought about 9 years of quarterly reports filed and ignored, of a goblin sitting in this office with a folder of flagged anomalies and denied challenges, waiting. "Ragnarok," he said. "Thank you. For the reports. For the flags. For all of it." The goblin looked at him with an expression that had moved past professional neutrality into something more complicated. "Your grandfather was a good client," Ragnarok said. "Your father was a good client. I have been looking forward to meeting you for 9 years, Lord Potter." He closed the folder. "Let us begin." They were back at the townhouse by 4, and Harry sat at the kitchen table with a Gringotts document folder, his father's letter, and a notebook, and he started writing a list. It was not an emotional list. It was a strategy list. He'd been thinking about it since Gringotts, pieces clicking into place with the logical satisfaction of a well-designed mechanism, each one dependent on the others, each one requiring the right sequence. First, the cleansing ritual. Tomorrow. Everything else was easier with his head clear. Second, claim the Black Lordship by establishing Sirius's innocence. The Gringotts' attestation of procedural anomalies plus his father's letter expressing explicit trust in Sirius plus the absence of any trial record, that was 3 separate lines of evidence. The ICW's Wrongful Imprisonment Tribunal had a 60-day fast-track provision for cases involving a sitting lord's family members. Third, once guardianship transferred to Sirius, file simultaneously in the ICW Contracts Tribunal to void all 12 marriage contracts on the grounds of fraudulent guardian authority. File grandfather Fleamont's preemptive block as supplementary evidence. Fourth, with the contracts voided, approach each family directly and give them a choice: quiet dissolution with no penalties, or public tribunal with full disclosure of the illegal binding methodology. Most of them would take the quiet dissolution. Fifth, and this was the part Harry had been thinking about most carefully, turning it over, looking at it from different angles, what to do about Dumbledore himself. He wasn't ready for fifth yet. Fifth required the ritual to be done and his mind to be his own, and required more information about what Dumbledore had actually done and why. Not because Harry was afraid of him, but because a plan built on incomplete information was a plan with cracks in it, and Harry had had enough cracks forced on him from outside. The ones in his plans would be his own choices. Fleur appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked at the list. How many steps? 5 so far. What's step 5? I'll know when I get there, Harry said. She sat down across from him. Jean-Pierre says the ritual is set for tomorrow morning. He has everything prepared. I know. He told me. How are you feeling? She asked it the way she asked most things, directly, without excess softness, like someone who believed the question deserved an honest answer more than a comfortable one. Harry thought about it. Like I've been wearing someone else's glasses my whole life, he said, and I've just taken them off, and everything is blurry, and I'm waiting to find out what it looks like when my own vision adjusts. Fleur was quiet for a moment. My mother says the ritual will be painful. Jean-Pierre said the same. Are you frightened? Harry thought about that question with the same honest care he'd given the first one. No, he said. I think he paused. I think I'm impatient. I've been other people's idea of Harry Potter my whole life. I want to find out what I actually am. Fleur looked at him across the table. In the yellow kitchen light with the evening coming down outside and the sound of Gabrielle somewhere upstairs narrating something elaborate to herself, she looked like she was deciding something. I think, she said carefully, that what you actually are is probably quite a lot. Harry looked at her. You don't know that. No, she agreed. But Jean-Pierre has been a healer for 32 years and he has never seen a compulsion array that complex on one person. Which means whoever placed them thought you required that much managing. Or they were just thorough. Dumbledore is thorough about things that need thoroughness, Fleur said. He would not put 68 charms on someone ordinary. She paused. I am not saying that to flatter you. I am saying it as a logical inference. Harry looked at the lordship ring on his finger. The griffin's head, the 4 stars. Audentes fortuna juvat, he said quietly. What? The ring inscription. Fortune favors the bold. Fleur's mouth curved. Then be bold. That's the plan, Harry said, and went back to his list. Jean-Pierre found him still at the table at 7, and without comment set a bowl of pasta and a second dose of the pale green potion in front of him, and stood with his arms crossed until Harry drank the potion first. It still tasted awful. You've been working for 4 hours, the healer said. I know. You should rest before tomorrow. I know that too. Harry kept writing. Dr. Moreau. The compulsion charm that created attachment to father figures, the one designed to make me instinctively trust someone positioning themselves as a mentor. How strong is it? Jean-Pierre pulled out a chair. It's among the more complex ones. Why? Because if it was placed before I was 1 year old, I've never experienced meeting a potential mentor figure without it. I don't know how I actually respond to people like that. He looked up. I'm going to meet a lot of adults in the next several weeks who are going to try to guide me. Wisengamot members, ICW officials, political allies. How do I know which instincts to trust? Jean-Pierre was quiet for a moment. After the ritual, the artificial responses will be gone, he said. What remains will be your own. Trust those. A pause. But Harry, the other thing I will tell you is this. You have been cross-checking your own instincts against logic and evidence all day. You read 3 books. You built a 5-step strategic framework. You asked Ragnarok the right questions at every turn. He met Harry's eyes. Whatever Dumbledore tried to build, what is actually in you is considerably more than what he was designing for. Trust that too. Harry ate his pasta. He thought about what Jean-Pierre had said, about the tree that grows around a nail. About what happens when you take the nail out. The tree was still a tree. Outside the London evening was settling into full dark, and somewhere across the city 9 years of filed reports sat in a Gringotts archive waiting to be used, and a man in Azkaban had no idea that the godson he'd been separated from was sitting at a kitchen table making a list. And somewhere else entirely a man with half-moon glasses and a long white beard was going about his evening with the comfortable certainty of someone whose plans were running exactly as designed. Harry finished his pasta. He capped his pen. He folded the list into his pocket, where it sat against his father's letter and the warmth of the lordship ring. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow his mind would be his own. And then they would see. Chapter 3. The Fire of Old Magic. The ritual room was in the basement. Harry hadn't been down there yet. Jean-Pierre had been preparing it since yesterday morning, and there was a quiet understanding in the house that you didn't go in until invited. Now, at 7 in the morning with the city barely awake outside, Harry followed Jean-Pierre down a stone staircase and through a door that had been warded shut overnight and stepped into a room that smelled like cedar smoke and something older, something that had no name he knew. The ritual circle took up most of the floor. It had been drawn in silver and copper, 2 interlocking rings with specific symbols marked at 12 points, and in the center was a chair, just a plain wooden chair, but placed with such deliberateness that it felt significant. 4 tall candles stood at the cardinal points, burning in colors that shifted when he looked at them directly. 3 stone bowls were positioned at the north, east, and west edges of the outer ring, each containing something different. Water in one, ash in another, something that moved like smoke but sat still like liquid in the third. Apollon was already there, standing at the south edge of the circle. Etienne stood at the west. Fleur was at the east, which surprised Harry slightly until he remembered that the ritual required 4 witnesses of magical ability and she was the most magically powerful option available after her parents. Jean-Pierre gestured at the chair. Sit. I will explain each stage as we come to it. If at any point you want to stop, say stop. I will take you out of the circle immediately. I won't want to stop, Harry said. I know. But the option exists. Jean-Pierre checked his instruments one more time. The ritual proceeds in 3 stages. The first is the uncovering. I will map each compulsion point precisely, and you will likely experience it as a kind of pressure. Different for each person. The second is the breaking. Each charm is severed from its anchor point in your magical core. This is the painful stage. The third is the sealing. The anchor points are healed and your natural magical architecture is reinforced. The third stage should feel. He paused. I have had patients describe it as surfacing. How long total? 3 to 4 hours. Harry sat in the chair. He put his hands on his knees. He looked at the silver circle around him and the 4 people standing at its edges, a healer who treated him like someone worth being honest with, a diplomat who had spent last night making calls on his behalf, a woman who had looked at a scan result and decided to care without being asked to, and a girl who had brought him tea at 2 in the morning and told him not to waste it. He thought, I've known these people for 36 hours. He thought, I've been more known in 36 hours than in 10 years. Jean-Pierre began. The first stage felt like pressure, as advertised, but not external pressure. Internal. Like something being illuminated that had always been in the dark, each compulsion point lighting up in sequence as Jean-Pierre's instruments moved through the ritual pattern. Harry felt them as specific things. The one at his left temple that blurred his assessment of authority figures. The one low in his chest that created the hazy warmth when he thought about Dumbledore specifically. The cluster of smaller ones that ran along what felt like the inside of his decision-making, like pebbles in a stream bed, each one subtle, each one redirecting flow by tiny degrees. 68 of them. He counted. He felt each one named and marked. Somewhere around number 40 he understood viscerally, in a way that abstract knowledge hadn't quite conveyed, what had been done to him. Not just the fact of it. The sheer labor of it, the intentionality of 68 separate acts of violation, each placed with care and purpose, each one designed to shape a specific aspect of who he was and how he thought. The oldest ones were so deeply embedded that they felt almost like bone. His hands were flat on his knees. His breathing was steady. He was very angry, and the anger was clean and cold and entirely his own, and that, the certainty that it was his, unmanufactured, uninfluenced, was almost worth the rest of it. Jean-Pierre completed the mapping and paused. He looked at Harry across the circle. Ready for the second stage? Yes, Harry said. The breaking began. It started gently enough. The first few charms were the newest ones, the ones placed when he was 7 or 8, and they came away with the sensation of pulling a thorn from skin. Sharp, brief, already better once it was out. He felt each removal as a small clearing, a tiny window opening, a slight brightening. Then Jean-Pierre reached the older ones. The charm at his left temple took 4 minutes to remove and felt like someone was carefully and deliberately pulling something out of the structure of his thoughts with their bare hands. Harry gripped the chair arms and breathed through it, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way he'd learned to breathe through pain in the years of being a Dursley afterthought. He didn't make a sound. Apollon, at the south point, had her hands clasped in front of her and was watching him with an expression that was absolutely composed and absolutely not comfortable. The ones in his chest were worse. The manufactured warmth around specific people and specific concepts, those were the deepest because they'd been reinforced over time, fed by every interaction with Dumbledore, every moment of instinctive trust that had then looped back and strengthened the charm that created it. Jean-Pierre had explained this. Positive reinforcement through lived experience made compulsion charms harder to remove because the magical architecture blended with genuine memory. Separating the charm from the organic feeling without damaging the memory itself was the most technically demanding part of the ritual. Harry felt it as something being carefully unwound from around his ribs. Slow and thorough and terrible. He was breathing in sharp careful measures and his knuckles were white on the chair arms, and at some point he became aware that his vision had blurred, which he identified after a moment as tears, not from grief but from raw physical response, the way your eyes water when something hits you in the face. He didn't stop breathing. He didn't close his eyes. Fleur, at the east point, had her hands at her sides and her jaw set. She was watching Harry with an expression he would think about later. Not pity, not horror, something more like witnessing. Like someone standing with you in something rather than watching it from outside. The oldest charms were last. The ones placed before his first birthday. These were so embedded that Jean-Pierre had to work around them like archaeology, not pulling but gradually disaggregating, breaking the connections one by one with the copper instrument moving in slow, precise patterns. Harry was not sure how long this took. Time had become less linear. He was in the pain the way you're in deep water, all the way through, no surface immediately available. But the surface was coming. He felt it before it arrived, a sense of the last thread releasing, and then, the third stage. Surfacing. Jean-Pierre had said patience described it that way. Harry understood it now completely. It was exactly that. A breaking of surface, a sudden and total transition from under to above, from dark to light, from compressed to open. The ceiling stage washed through him like cold water, and where the 68 anchor points had been there was now just space. Clean space. His own. He sat in the chair for a moment and breathed. Then he became aware of the room again. The candles. The circle. Jean-Pierre standing directly in front of him with the copper instrument held carefully at his side and his face showing the controlled relief of a man who has successfully navigated something he was not certain he could navigate. "How do you feel?" Jean-Pierre said. Harry looked at his hands. He thought about Dumbledore, and found nothing imposed, nothing manufactured, just the clean information of what he knew and what had been done. He thought about the Dursleys, just the plain facts of 10 years. He thought about his parents and felt grief that was entirely his own, clear-edged and present in a way it had never been before, and that was the thing that almost broke the composure, because he hadn't known until now how much of that grief had been managed, kept at a distance by charms designed to keep him functional rather than real. "I feel," Harry said, and stopped, because words were genuinely inadequate to the specific experience of being oneself for the first time, like I can see properly. Jean-Pierre let out a long, slow breath. "Good," he said. "That is exactly right." Apollon crossed into the circle. She crouched in front of Harry the way Jean-Pierre had crouched in Diagon Alley, at his level, and looked at his face for a moment. "Welcome back," she said quietly. "I was never here before," Harry said. "No," she agreed. "Welcome for the first time, then." Jean-Pierre kept him in the workroom for another hour, running post-ritual diagnostics with an amber crystal that moved slowly over Harry's head and shoulders while Harry sat and drank water and let the clarity settle into him like new soil after rain. Every few minutes he'd feel something shift slightly as the ceiling completed, some small piece of his own magical architecture clicking into its natural position for the first time. It felt enormous. Not dramatic, not like power manifesting visibly, not like lightning or heat. Just vast internal space, the way a room feels after you've moved all the furniture out. "Your magical core," Jean-Pierre said, studying the amber crystal, "is significantly stronger than the suppression would have suggested. The compulsion array was drawing from it continuously, maintaining 68 charms requires energy, and that energy was coming from your own core without your knowledge." He looked at Harry over the crystal. "You have been carrying that weight for 10 years. What does that mean now that it's gone?" "It means your available magical energy is going to be," Jean-Pierre considered his words, "substantial. You may find your accidental magic has already been more significant than you realized, because even suppressed, the overflow had to go somewhere. Going forward, you will need to be mindful of control." "I've been doing accidental magic since I was very young," Harry said. "Strange things. My hair growing back overnight after Aunt Petunia cut it. Ending up on a school roof when a boy was chasing me. That is consistent with a core attempting to express itself against significant suppression," Jean-Pierre said. "Think of a river dammed at its source, the water finds ways through." He capped the amber crystal. "The dam is gone now. Expect the river to be larger than you anticipated." Harry thought about that with great interest rather than concern, the way you think about a new tool rather than a new problem. He stood, and the world was immediately different in a way he couldn't describe precisely. More there. More present under his feet, more real in his hands. He looked at the ring on his finger and the griffin caught the candlelight and he felt the connection to it differently now, not a vague warmth but something clear and bilateral, like a conversation rather than a monologue. Jean-Pierre walked him upstairs, where Apollon and Etienne were waiting in the sitting room. Fleur was on the stairs, and when Harry came up she looked at his face for about 2 seconds and then looked away with an expression that might have been relief. "I've been going through the documentation from Gringotts," Etienne said, without preamble, because he was the kind of man who understood that Harry would want to move immediately rather than rest. "I have a contact at the ICW's legal division, a senior arbitrator named Claudette Beaumont. She has agreed to an informal consultation tomorrow. Off the record initially, to assess the case strength before we file anything officially. How did she respond when you described what we have? Harry asked. She was quiet for about 30 seconds, Etienne said, and then she said, and I am quoting directly, Etienne, if this is real, it is the largest abuse of guardianship authority in ICW records since 1887. A pause. I told her it was real. Is she trustworthy? Etienne looked at him. She is someone I have worked alongside for 12 years. She has turned down 3 separate approaches from Dumbledore's allies requesting favorable consideration on various ICW matters. He paused. She has also been quietly building a file on irregularities in British magical governance for the last 5 years. She will not go to Dumbledore with this. But she'll be cautious. She'll be cautious and thorough, which is what we need. Etienne set down the document folder. The serious black matter, I want to be careful about sequencing. If we move on that publicly before we have the contract challenge filed, Dumbledore will know what's coming and he has sufficient ministry influence to create procedural obstacles. So we file the contract challenge first, Harry said. Before we do anything about Sirius publicly. That's my assessment. But we build the case for Sirius simultaneously, so when the contracts are challenged and he starts looking for ways to respond, we already have enough for a wrongful imprisonment tribunal. Harry sat in the armchair by the window. The morning light was coming through at an angle and it caught the ring and threw a small light across the wall. What does Dumbledore do when he realizes what's happening? He attempts to speak with you directly, Apollon said. She'd been listening from the doorway. He positions himself as someone who can explain everything, who had your best interests in mind, who can make it right. He is very good at that. And if that doesn't work? He works through intermediaries. Molly Weasley, perhaps, she is close to Dumbledore and would approach you with warmth and generosity. Or Hagrid, who is genuinely fond of you and would be used without knowing it. She paused. He does not use threats. He uses care. That is what makes him dangerous. Harry thought about that. He thought about the manufactured warmth in his chest, which was gone now, leaving him able to assess the concept of Dumbledore with the same clean neutrality he'd apply to anything else. He'll come, Harry said. When he realizes. And when he does, I want to be ready to have that conversation. You want to talk to him? Fleur said from the stairs. Eventually. Not now. Harry looked at his hands. First I want to know everything I'm entitled to know. Then I want the contracts dissolved. Then I want Sirius free. And then, he paused. Then I want to sit down with Dumbledore and tell him exactly what I know and exactly what I intend to do and give him the opportunity to be honest with me. He looked up. Because here's the thing. He's going to fight this if he thinks he can win. The only way to stop the fighting is to make it absolutely clear that he can't, and then give him a choice about how to respond to that. Etienne was watching him. What do you think he'll choose? I think he'll try to negotiate, Harry said. I think he'll try to find a version of this where he keeps some level of control over my future, because he genuinely believes that's necessary. He thinks I need to be shaped toward Voldemort. A beat. And I think that's the part where we'll have the real argument, because I'm not going to tell him I won't fight Voldemort. I might. I don't know yet what that situation actually looks like without 68 compulsion charms in the way. But whatever I do, I'm going to do it because I've decided to, not because I was engineered to. The room was quiet. That, Etienne said slowly, is a more nuanced position than I expected. Dumbledore might be wrong about how to fight Voldemort, Harry said. He's not wrong that Voldemort is a problem. Those are different things. Apollon looked at her husband. Something passed between them. You are extraordinary, Harry, she said. I'm just thinking clearly for the first time, Harry said. Which honestly should be everyone's baseline. The afternoon brought unexpected mail. A dignified tawny owl arrived at lunchtime with a letter bearing the Gringotts seal, which Ragnarok had apparently sent immediately after their meeting had been formally logged in the estate records. It was brief and informational, a confirmation that the Potter lordship claim had been filed with the Ministry's magical registry, that the estate management order had been formally challenged, and that Ragnarok had taken the liberty of flagging 3 additional financial anomalies they had not discussed in person. Harry read the anomalies section twice. "Someone has been making withdrawals from the Potter main vault," he said. "Quarterly. Since 1981. Etienne took the letter and read it. His expression went carefully neutral in a way that was more alarming than anger. 14,000 galleons per quarter, he said. For 9 years, Harry said. He did the arithmetic. 504,000 galleons. Taken by whom? Ragnarok doesn't say directly. He says the withdrawal authorization bears the seal of the Magical Guardianship Office. Harry looked up. That's Dumbledore's office. The room was quiet again. This was becoming a familiar rhythm, the revelation, the silence, the processing. He was paying himself, Fleur said from her chair. She said it like she was completing a sentence that had been building for some time. He was paying himself for my family's estate, Harry said. He said it plainly, without drama, because the drama would come later and right now the plain fact was more useful. For 9 years. More than 500,000 galleons. Financial misconduct on top of the magical violations, Etienne said. Harry, this changes the complexity of the case. This isn't just guardianship abuse, this is criminal fraud. I know. Ragnarok will have the withdrawal records. Dates, amounts, authorization signatures. I know. Harry set the letter down. Can you contact Claudette Beaumont again? Tell her about the financial component. Etienne was already standing. Yes. And Ragnarok, I want him to prepare a full accounting of every unauthorized withdrawal, every denied challenge, every blocked access request. The complete picture. Harry looked at the letter in his hands. When we file this, I want it to be everything at once. Every violation. Every crime. Everything documented and evidenced and filed simultaneously so there's no room to respond to one thing while hiding another. That is a significant undertaking, Apollon said. I know. How long do we need? Etienne and Apollon exchanged the quick, communicative look of people who have been together long enough to hold conversations in silence. A week, Etienne said. Perhaps 10 days to do it properly. Then we have 10 days. Harry stood up. I want to visit Sirius. Everyone looked at him. Not to free him, Harry said quickly. Not yet. I just want, he paused, and for the first time all day something that was not strategy moved across his face. Something younger. He's my godfather. He's been in Azkaban for 9 years for something I now have very good reason to believe he didn't do. I want him to know that someone is coming. He paused. I want him to know I'm coming. Apollon looked at him for a long moment. Her expression had the warmth in it again, the kind that wasn't soft but was deep, the kind that came from actually seeing someone. I will look into the visitor protocols, she said. Thank you. Harry. She crossed to him and did something unexpected. She put her hand on his shoulder, briefly, the way adults did when they wanted to convey something that didn't fit into words. What you are doing takes courage. Not the dramatic kind. The other kind, the kind that requires getting up every morning and continuing. Harry looked at her hand on his shoulder and then at her face, and for a brief moment the clarity of the day and the weight of the letter and the exhaustion of the ritual and the plain fact of having people around him who were choosing to be there all landed at once, and he let it land rather than managing it. I know, he said. But I've been patient my whole life. I'm just choosing what to be patient for now. Gabrielle found him in the garden at dusk. He was sitting on the low stone wall at the garden's edge, watching the sky go from orange to purple, and she climbed up beside him with the certainty of someone who had decided company was happening regardless of preferences and sat with her legs dangling. "Jean-Pierre says you were very brave today," she said. "Jean-Pierre is kind. He is not kind about things that are not true," Gabrielle said firmly. "He told Fleur last year that her essay on healing theory was mediocre and she should try harder." A pause. She was very cross. Harry looked at her sideways. Was the essay mediocre? Probably. Fleur can be lazy about things she finds easy. Gabrielle kicked her legs. She is not lazy about things she finds important. What does she find important? Gabrielle considered this with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who is also, it was increasingly clear, considerably more observant than most adults. "Fairness," she said. She cares a great deal about fairness. About people being treated as what they are and not what someone decided they should be. She paused. "I think that is why she likes you." Harry looked at the darkening sky. "She barely knows me." "She has been watching you think for 2 days," Gabrielle said, as if this were more than sufficient. "Fleur decides quickly about people. She is usually right." A pause. "She said you are either going to change everything or break trying. Which does she think?" Gabrielle looked at him with her mother's blue-gray eyes, clear as water. "She said the same thing when she decided to enter the Triwizard Tournament," she said, which didn't answer the question and also answered it completely. The sky had gone fully purple now, and the first star appeared, and the city hummed quietly at the edges of the garden's concealment charms, and Harry sat with the largest day of his life settling around him like sediment after disturbed water. He was 10 years old and he had 12 illegal marriage contracts about to be dissolved, a godfather to free, a financial crime to document, an old man to corner with his own evidence, and a war somewhere in the future that he might or might not be the right person for but was going to approach on his own terms regardless. He felt, for the first time he could identify, like himself. "Gabrielle," he said. "Yes?" "Your family, why is it named after them in French stories?" "The Delacour name. Does it mean something?" "Delacour," Gabrielle said. "Of the court. We are very old." She said this with the absolute unself-consciousness of a child who has grown up understanding their family's history without finding it remarkable. "Papa says it means we have obligations. Maman says it means we have power and obligations are what we do with it." Harry thought about that. "Your mother is right." "I know," Gabrielle said serenely. "She usually is." They sat until the full dark came, and then Apollon called from the kitchen window and Gabrielle hopped off the wall with the boneless ease of the very young and ran inside. Harry stayed a moment longer, looking at the stars appearing one by one over London. He thought about his father's letter. About Audentes Fortuna Juvat. About the nail removed from the tree, and the tree that remained, finding out for the first time how tall it had always meant to grow. Then he went inside, where there was food and warmth and people who were choosing to be on his side, and he sat down at the table and started working on step 2. Chapter 4. The Lion and the Villa Azkaban sat in the North Sea like a bad thought you couldn't shake, grey and absolute and surrounded by water that looked cold enough to kill a person simply by existing near it. Harry had read about it in one of the books from the Delacour shelves, the Dementors, the psychological deterioration, the way prisoners aged in ways that had nothing to do with time. He had read it with the clean, absorbing attention he gave to things he needed to understand, and he had not let himself feel it until the moment the ministry escort boat came around the headland and the fortress actually appeared. Then he felt it. Not fear, he'd established his position on fear as largely impractical. Something closer to grief, cold and specific, for a man who had spent 9 years in that place for something he hadn't done, while the person responsible had been signing quarterly withdrawal authorizations from Harry's family vault. Apollon stood beside him at the boat's rail. She had arranged the visit through channels Harry didn't fully understand, something involving Etienne's diplomatic credentials and a quiet conversation with a ministry official who apparently owed the Delacour family a favor and had been waiting for an opportunity to repay it without Dumbledore knowing. The official had processed the visitor permit in 3 hours and had not filed it under Harry's name. "They will allow 20 minutes, Apollon said. "Jean-Pierre will be with you." "I will wait." "You don't need to come at all," Harry said. "You've already." "I am aware I don't need to," she said. "I am here." Harry looked at her and then back at the fortress and said nothing more. The inside of Azkaban was exactly as bad as the outside suggested, except that it was also cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Harry walked through it with Jean-Pierre beside him and a ministry escort in front, and he kept his jaw set and his shoulders back and his hands relaxed at his sides, and he focused on not letting the ambient despair, the Dementor effect leaking through the stone, get its hooks into anything it could use. It tried. He felt it as a specific pressure at the edges of his consciousness, reaching for the worst things: the cupboard, the cold kitchen, Dudley's fist, 10 years of careful invisibility, and he let the pressure find the thoughts and then he set them aside with the deliberate, practiced calm he'd been developing since he was very young and had learned that feelings were more useful when you decided what to do with them. The escort stopped at a door. 20 minutes, he said, and unlocked it and stood aside. Harry went in. The cell was small and grey and had a window the size of a book that let in a column of watery light. Sirius Black was sitting on the edge of the cot with his back against the wall, and he looked up when the door opened with the automatic wariness of someone whose environment had trained them to expect nothing good from any interruption. Harry looked at him and had to work quite hard to keep his face steady. Sirius Black at 33 should have been a young man. He had the bones of someone who had once been handsome and vital, good cheekbones, dark eyes that had been sharp once. But 9 years of Azkaban had done to him what 9 years of Azkaban did to everyone, and what was left was gaunt and grey-skinned and held together, it seemed, more by habit than by any particular conviction that it was worth the effort. Until he looked at Harry's face. Until he saw the eyes and the scar and whatever else he found there, and then something happened in the dark eyes that Harry had no words for, something that was the opposite of going out. "James," Sirius said, very quietly. And then, correcting himself, "No. Harry." "Harry," he confirmed. He pulled up the single stool and sat directly in front of Sirius, close, because 20 minutes was not long and he didn't want to spend any of it at a distance. "I need to tell you some things quickly and then ask you some things. We have 20 minutes. Sirius stared at him. "How, later?" "Listen." Harry leaned forward. "My name is Harry Potter. I'm 10 years old. I claimed the Potter Lordship ring 3 days ago at Gringotts." He watched Sirius's face. "I know you were my godfather. I know you were arrested without a trial. I know the charges were never formally prosecuted. I know you're innocent." The last sentence hit Sirius like something physical. He went very still. "How do you know that?" he said. Very carefully. "My father's letter. Gringotts records. 3 pages of arrest documentation for a supposed mass murder, which is so thin it's practically transparent." Harry held Sirius's gaze. "I also know about Peter Pettigrew." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several additional degrees. Sirius's eyes went sharp, suddenly, completely sharp, the sharpness of someone dragged back from a very far distance. "He's alive," Sirius said. "That's what the evidence suggests, yes. He was the secret keeper. Not me. James and Lily changed from me to him at the last minute. Dumbledore advised it, said I was too obvious a choice, said Pettigrew was safer because no one would suspect him." Sirius's voice was rough from disuse but gaining traction. "He was the one who told Voldemort. And then he killed 12 muggles to fake his own death and frame me, and he's been hiding ever since." He stopped. Looked at Harry. "You know this." "I'm building the case to prove it," Harry said. Ragnarok at Gringotts has the arrest records and has formally documented the procedural violations. A senior ICW arbitrator named Claudette Beaumont is reviewing the case. There's an irregularity report, a financial misconduct file, and, he paused. Serious. We're filing a wrongful imprisonment tribunal through the ICW. Not the British Ministry. Why not the Ministry? Because Dumbledore controls significant portions of it. Sirius looked at him for a long moment. You're 10, he said. Everyone keeps saying that, Harry said. I'm also the person who is going to get you out of here. So if you have information that helps the case, I need it now because I have about 16 minutes left. Something moved across Sirius's face, grief and fury and something that was almost laughter, which was probably the most serious black thing possible. Merlin's beard, he said softly. You're James and Lily's kid, aren't you? You're actually both of them at once. The Fidelius charm switch, Harry said. Is there anyone who knew? Anyone who witnessed the decision? Dumbledore. He arranged it. Sirius's jaw tightened. Remus Lupin. He might have known. He and James talked about it at the time. A pause, something complicated. We didn't trust Remus then. Thought one of us might be a spy. Pettigrew pushed that suspicion. His expression went briefly hollow. Pettigrew was very good at suggesting doubts about everyone except himself. Where is Remus Lupin now? I don't know. After everything collapsed, after James and Lily died and I was taken, I don't know what happened to anyone. I'll find him. Harry filed it. Is there anything else? Any evidence you know about that I haven't mentioned? My wand was never tested, Sirius said. At the scene. Aurors are required to test a wand used in a killing, it's standard procedure. Mine was never tested because there was no formal investigation. If you had my wand and tested it now, there would be no killing curse in its magical record. 12 Muggles died from a cutting curse, Pettigrew's curse, not mine. Harry looked at him steadily. Where's your wand? Property lockup. Azkaban intake storage. They keep everything. A grim pause. I've thought about this for 9 years, Harry. Every evidentiary detail. Every procedural failure. Every single thing that should have been done and wasn't. I've had nothing but time. I know, Harry said. And we're going to use every one of them. Sirius was looking at him with an expression that was doing several things at once, grief for James, something protective, something wondering. Your father wrote a letter, he said. Not a question. Yes. What did he say about me? Harry looked at him. He thought about the letter, which he had read 4 times by now and which sat in his jacket pocket. He thought about the specific sentence that had answered a question he hadn't known he was asking about what family actually felt like. Harry said carefully, that if anything happened to him and you were still standing, you would burn the world down to find me. He paused. And that he trusted that completely. Sirius closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them and they were wet and absolutely clear and he looked at Harry with the focused attention of someone who has just found their north. Get me out, Sirius said. That's the plan, Harry said. The escort knocked. 14 seconds of warning. Harry stood. I'm going to need you to be patient for maybe 2 more weeks, he said. And I know patience is, I've managed 9 years, Sirius said. His voice was very dry. 2 weeks is manageable. After you're out, Harry said, I'm going to need somewhere to live that isn't my aunt and uncle's. Sirius looked at him. The cottage in Godric's Hollow. James left it to me in the will. It's been sitting empty. A pause, something complicated moving through his expression. It'll need work. I'm good at work, Harry said. The door opened. Harry started toward it, then stopped. One more thing, he said, looking back at Sirius. Dumbledore advised the switch from you to Pettigrew. Sirius met his eyes. Yes. Did you ever wonder why? Sirius was quiet for a long moment. I've had 9 years, he said again. His voice was very quiet. I've wondered about a great many things. Harry nodded once and walked out. The boat back across the North Sea was cold and grey, and Apollon didn't ask him anything until they were on the mainland and the port key had taken them back to the townhouse garden, and Harry was standing in the late afternoon light with the Azkaban cold still sitting in his bones. Well, she said. His wand was never tested, Harry said. There was no formal investigation. He's given me 3 separate evidentiary threads we didn't have before. He looked at her. He's been sitting in there for 9 years running the case in his head. Is he? Apollon paused, finding the word. How is he? He's intact, Harry said. Which was the most honest thing he could say, and also the most astonishing. 2 things happened the following morning that changed the timeline. The first was a letter delivered by a large, self-important eagle owl bearing the Hogwarts seal, addressed to Harry J. Potter at an address that was not Privet Drive and should not, by any reasonable logic, have found him. Which meant either Hogwarts letters used magical tracking beyond the home address on record, or someone had updated the record. Harry looked at the letter for a moment with the particular stillness he used when something required assessment rather than reaction. Then he opened it. The standard letter. List of supplies. The invitation to purchase a wand at Ollivander's, robes at Madame Malkin's, books at Flourish and Blot's. Term begins September 1st. He set it down and thought about Hogwarts, a place he'd been told about, dreamed about in a vague way, built an idea of. He thought about it now without the soft glow that had surrounded it before, without the manufactured excitement that he recognized in retrospect had been shaped by the compulsion charms. He thought about it plainly. Hogwarts. Dumbledore's school. Where Dumbledore was headmaster and had complete institutional authority over the students in his care. He thought about what that meant in light of the last 5 days. He set the Hogwarts letter aside. He would deal with it properly, but on his own terms, and after everything else was in motion. The second thing was Fleur, who appeared at his door at 7:30 with her jacket on and her schoolbag over her shoulder and an expression that combined "I have made a decision" with "I am not asking for permission." "I am going with you to Gringotts today," she said. "Why?" "Because you need someone who can read French, and I have been working through the ICW statute books and found 3 additional provisions that apply to your contract situation." She pulled a folded parchment from her jacket. Article 47, c. of the 1962 International Magical Contracts Convention provides that any binding agreement entered into through the authority of a position of institutional trust, which guardianship legally is, carries an automatic bad faith clause if the guardian's interests conflict with the ward's. The marriage contracts are potentially voidable under bad faith as well as the unilateral filing grounds, which gives you 2 separate legal arguments running simultaneously. Harry looked at her. At the parchment. At the precise, satisfied expression of someone who had found something useful and was delivering it efficiently. "When did you read the ICW statute books?" he asked. "Last night. There is a copy in Papa's library." She pushed the parchment toward him. The bad faith argument is actually stronger than the unilateral filing argument in 3 of the 12 contracts, specifically Bones, Abbott, and Macmillan, where the families are politically neutral and where Dumbledore had a documented interest in controlling their Wisengamot voting through your marriage alliance. Harry took the parchment and read it. It was detailed, specific, and she was right. "You want to be involved," he said. Fleur looked at him evenly. "I am already involved. I was at the ritual. I have been reading your strategy notes. You left them on the kitchen table, they were not private." A pause. "I find this interesting and I am useful in it. Unless you have an objection." Harry thought about having an objection and found none. He thought about what Gabrielle had said, "She cares about fairness," and thought about the fact that Fleur had looked up ICW statute law at her own initiative on behalf of someone she'd known for 5 days, and thought about the tea at 2 in the morning and don't waste it. "Come on, then," he said. Fleur almost smiled. "I'll get my coat." Ragnok had apparently spent the week in an excellent mood, if a goblin's excellent mood could be distinguished from their default state of contained intensity by the fact that he had added a second lamp to his office and had 4 files laid out in advance of their arrival. He looked at Fleur with the slight assessment he gave to all new arrivals and apparently found her satisfactory, because he moved directly to business. "The financial misconduct documentation," Ragnok said, opening the first file. 504,000 galleons in unauthorized quarterly withdrawals over 9 years. I have the withdrawal dates, amounts, authorization signatures, and the receipt confirmations from the guardianship office. The signatures are unambiguous." He paused. "I have also identified 3 earlier withdrawals from the Black family vault, made in 1981 under the Emergency Family Management Provision, which allows temporary access to an imprisoned family member's estate. The provision has a 12-month limit. The withdrawals continued for 22 months. Additional fraud," Harry said. Additional fraud, Ragnok confirmed, with the satisfaction of a man whose 9 years of careful documentation were finally finding their destination. The Black Vault total adds approximately 40,000 galleons to the figure. What's the current balance of the Black Vault? Depleted but functional. The Black family fortune was primarily held in property rather than liquid assets: Grimald Place in London, the Cornish estate, 3 pieces of Scottish Highland. Those cannot be accessed through a vault withdrawal and remain intact. He opened the second file. The Potter Vault withdrawals were partially offset by the estate's investment returns, which I managed conservatively in anticipation of Lord Potter's majority. Harry looked at Fleur. She was making precise notes on the parchment she'd brought, her handwriting small and rapid. She caught his look and shook her head slightly. "Keep going, I have this." "Sirius Black's wand," Harry said. "Intake storage. We need it for wand testing as part of the wrongful imprisonment case." Ragnok was already making a note. "Azkaban property management falls under the Ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement. I have a contact there, not a sympathetic one politically, but one who is meticulous about procedure. A formal request from a Lord of the Wisengamot, citing active tribunal proceedings, for access to evidentiary material should be processable within 48 hours under standard legal protocol. You can make that request? As Gringotts account manager for House Potter and House Black both, yes. I have standing." Ragnok looked at Harry with those sharp, steady eyes. "I should also tell you, there have been 2 inquiries to your estate records in the last 4 days. Both from ministry officials. Neither from a department with standing to request estate information without your knowledge." Harry sat very still. Dumbledore knows something is happening. He knows someone has accessed the estate records and that the cognizance suppression order has been challenged. He does not yet know the scope. Ragnok closed the second file and opened the third. Which is why the simultaneous filing strategy is correct. Once we file, everything becomes public record and there is nothing to prevent by intelligence gathering. How soon can we file? 3 days, Ragnok said. I need 2 days to complete the attestation documents and 1 day for the formal compilation. He looked at Harry. I want this done correctly. A filing that is perfect is worth considerably more than a filing that is fast. 3 days, then. Harry looked at the fourth file. What's that? Ragnok opened it with the particular deliberateness of someone revealing something they have been waiting to reveal. This is the Pettigrew file, he said. The room went very quiet. Peter Pettigrew, Ragnok said, is listed as deceased in the ministry records. However, Gringotts does not rely solely on ministry records for estate management purposes. We perform independent verification. He paused. Peter Pettigrew had a small vault at Gringotts, opened in 1974. A dormant vault, no significant assets, primarily personal effects. Dormant vaults are reviewed every 5 years for continued maintenance purposes. He looked at Harry. The vault was reviewed in 1986. The magical signature verification, which compares the living account holder's magical signature to the registered one, returned a positive match. He was alive in 1986, Harry said. The vault review process requires a proximity verification, which functions within approximately a 3-mile radius of Gringotts. Ragnarok's eyes were very steady. Peter Pettigrew was within 3 miles of Gringotts in June of 1986. He is registered as deceased. He should not have returned a positive signature match. He closed the file. I have the verification record. It is time-stamped and witnessed by 2 Gringotts staff. Fleur had stopped writing. She was looking at the file with the expression of someone recalibrating exactly how solid the ground under their feet was. He's in London, Harry said. Or was. In 1986, yes. I cannot speak to his current whereabouts. Ragnarok's tone was dry. I can speak to the fact that a man the Ministry believes to be dead was alive, in London, for years after his supposed death, and that this record has been sitting in my files waiting for someone with standing to use it. Harry looked at Ragnarok. He thought about 9 years of patient, meticulous documentation. About quarterly reports filed and ignored. About challenges denied and logged and filed again. About a goblin who had been tending the evidence the way you tend something you intend to use. Ragnarok, Harry said. When all of this is resolved, when the tribunal is done and Sirius is free and the contracts are dissolved, I want to discuss the long-term management of the Potter estate with you. Properly. With full access and regular meetings. Ragnarok looked at him for a moment. That, the goblin said, is the correct conversation to want to have. He closed the 4th file with the finality of a book ending on a good note. 3 days, Lord Potter. I will be ready. They came out of Gringotts into afternoon Diagon Alley, bright and loud and smelling of cauldrons and something sweet from the direction of Fortescue's, and Harry stood on the steps for a moment and thought about the Pettigrew information and what it meant for the timeline and how it slotted against everything else. You're doing it again, Fleur said beside him. Doing what? The thing where you stand very still and your eyes go distant and you are clearly running through 17 different strategic scenarios simultaneously. Is it annoying? It is interesting, she said. Come on. I need to look at something. She led him down the alley at a pace that suggested she'd been here before and knew where she was going, which turned out to be a second-hand bookshop tucked between an apothecary and a shop selling sneakoscopes that Harry had never noticed despite walking past it twice. Fleur went directly to a shelf in the back with the ease of someone who knew the stock. Harry browsed. He found a copy of Advanced Magical Contracts and their applications which was considerably more detailed than the one at the townhouse, and a slim volume called The Political History of Azkaban which seemed immediately relevant. This, Fleur said, and held up a large, battered volume, Notable Cases of the International Wizarding Court, 1900 to 1980. There are precedent cases in here. For the Wrongful Imprisonment Tribunal. I looked through this last summer. She handed it to him. Page 412. There's a 1961 case involving a French wizard imprisoned without trial under wartime emergency powers. The ICW's ruling on procedural requirements is directly applicable. Harry took it and found the page. He read for 2 minutes, standing in the dusty bookshop aisle. The ICW held that emergency powers cannot substitute for due process in any case where the defendant survived the emergency period, he said. Pettigrew staged his death in 1981. The war emergency was over by then. Sirius's continued imprisonment under the wartime provision is legally indefensible. Yes, Fleur said. I thought so. Harry looked at her. You've been doing this since last night, he said. Since you went to Azkaban, actually. While you were gone. She met his eyes without any particular self-consciousness. I do not like injustice. And I am good at research. A pause. Also, I wanted to be useful. You are, Harry said. Genuinely useful. I mean that. Fleur looked at him with an expression that was briefly, completely unguarded, a flash of something pleased and almost surprised, and then her usual composure returned and she turned to the shelf. Good, she said. Buy the book. We have more to get through. Harry bought 3 books and Fleur bought 2, and they walked back through the alley in the late afternoon light and talked through the case structure, refining it, Harry asking questions and Fleur answering them or saying I don't know, let's find out with equal precision, and somewhere in the middle of a detailed conversation about the ICW's fast-track provisions Harry had the thought that this specifically, walking through Diagon Alley talking about contract law with someone who was taking him seriously, was something he was going to remember. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was ordinary in the way that good things are ordinary, the way warmth is ordinary, simply and thoroughly there. Etienne was in the sitting room when they got back, flu powder still dusting his shoulder, which meant he had just arrived from somewhere via the fireplace. He had an expression Harry recognized now as his significant development expression, controlled but with an undercurrent of urgency. Remus Lupin, he said, when Harry came through the door. Harry stopped. You found him. He was easy to find, as it turns out. He is currently employed as a defense against the dark arts tutor for a Muggle-born family in Edinburgh. He has been living very quietly. Etienne sat. I made initial contact this afternoon through a mutual ministry acquaintance. He has agreed to meet. When? Tomorrow morning. He is operating to London tonight. Etienne paused. He was, when I explained why I was calling, he was very quiet for a long time. Then he asked if you were safe. That was his first question. Harry felt something shift in his chest, something that was neither manufactured nor complicated, just simply the fact of someone who had known his parents asking if he was safe, and meaning it. Tell him yes, Harry said. Tell him yes and that I need his testimony. I already told him. Etienne looked at him. Harry. He knows about the Pettigrew situation. He knows Sirius was innocent. He always knew. He suspected. After the fact, once the dust settled, he began to question what he'd been told. But he was grieving and isolated and, Etienne paused. He said he was ashamed that he didn't push harder at the time. Harry sat down slowly. He thought about a man living quietly in Edinburgh, tutoring other people's children, carrying 9 years of shame about something that wasn't his fault but that grief had convinced him was. He thought about how many separate people had been damaged by the same connected chain of decisions. He's a witness, Harry said. A good one. He knew about the secret keeper decision. He can testify to the dynamic between James, Sirius, and Pettigrew. He looked at Etienne. Can he testify before the ICW tribunal? With appropriate protection, yes. He will need to be listed as a protected witness given that he may be at risk from, Etienne paused, from those with an interest in Pettigrew remaining officially dead. Voldemort supporters, Harry said. If Pettigrew is confirmed alive and his role as the actual traitor is established, it implicates everyone he was connected to. Yes. Harry thought about the board. About all the pieces and how they were connected and where each move led. He thought about Dumbledore, who by now had almost certainly noticed that something significant was happening and was trying to determine what and from whom. He thought about Dumbledore's first move. He's going to try to talk to me before we file, Harry said. Within the next 3 days. He'll have noticed the estate record access and the suppression order challenge, and he'll want to get ahead of it. He looked at Etienne. Don't tell me to avoid him. I wasn't going to, Etienne said, mildly. I want to see him, Harry said. But on my terms, at my timing, after we file. Not before. Agreed. Etienne paused. And if he approaches before then? He won't approach me directly. He'll send someone. Harry thought about what Apollon had said, Hagrid, Molly Weasley, someone warm and genuine who would be used without knowing it. If someone contacts the Delacour townhouse asking for me, I want to know immediately. Of course. Apollon appeared from the kitchen. Dinner in 20 minutes, she said. And then, reading the room with the accuracy she apparently applied to everything, what happened? Remus Lupin, Harry said. He's coming tomorrow. And Ragnarok has a Pettigrew Alive signature from 1986. Apollon stood with this for a moment. Then, dinner first, she said, with the authority of someone who understood that strategy worked better with food, and then we plan. That night, late, Harry sat in the garden again. The stars were clear and the city was quiet, and he had his notebook open but wasn't writing in it, just sitting, letting the day settle. He heard the door and Fleur came and sat beside him on the wall. Not Gabrielle this time. Fleur, with a glass of water and the look of someone who also hadn't quite been able to sleep. How is it going? She asked. Not about the case. About him. Harry looked at the stars. It's strange, he said. Everything is moving quickly. Every day there's something new, a new piece of evidence, a new development, a new person. And I'm managing it, I think. But sometimes it catches up. What catches up? All of it. He was quiet for a moment. The fact that it was real. Not just the charms, all of it. 10 years of being managed and shaped and not knowing. He looked at his hands, at the ring. I look at what my parents left, the letter, the ring, the vault, the allies they built, the care they took, and they made all of that for me. For a specific person they were imagining I might become. And someone spent 10 years trying to make me into a different person instead. He paused. I think what catches up is the grief of it. Not dramatic grief. Just ordinary sadness about time. Fleur was quiet beside him, listening with her full attention in a way that was becoming familiar. You are still becoming that person, she said. The one they imagined. I don't know who that is yet. No, she agreed. But you are doing it honestly, which is the important part. She looked up at the same stars he was looking at. My mother, when she had to fight for our family against those approaches, against the contracting families, she told me something. She said the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to become what someone else decided you should be. Not in rebellion, just in clarity. In simply being what you are instead. Harry thought about that. About clarity. About the clean space where the charms had been. Your family, he said. Coming here, doing all of this, your father making flu calls, your mother arranging Azkaban visits, Jean-Pierre, none of them had to. No, Fleur said. Why did they? She looked at him. In the starlight her face was calm and direct. Because my mother saw what had been done to a child and decided it was unacceptable. Because my father believes in proper governance and this is the opposite of that. Because Jean-Pierre has been a healer for 32 years and takes it personally when someone uses medicine as a weapon. She paused. And because I asked them to. Harry looked at her. You asked them to? When Jean-Pierre first showed my mother the scan, I saw your face. You did not panic. You asked how to fix it. She held his gaze. I told my mother that whatever that child was, we should help him. Because someone who responds to being told their mind has been invaded by asking how to fix it is someone worth helping. A brief pause. I was right. Harry sat with that. He sat with the weight and the warmth of it, the specific gift of being seen clearly by someone without agenda. Thank you, he said. For asking them. Fleur looked away, back at the stars. Don't thank me, she said, which was the same thing she'd said about the tea, and he was starting to understand it wasn't deflection but something else, something that meant this isn't a transaction, there is no debt here. He understood it. He filed it. He thought he'd try to be that kind of person too. They sat together until the stars began to fade at the horizon's edge, talking about smaller things, about what Hogwarts might actually be like, about the ICW cases in the Notable Judgments book, about a particularly strange historical entry in the Noble Houses volume that had made Harry laugh for the first time since Diagon Alley. About Fleur's school in France, Beauxbatons, where she said the magic was approached like art and the headmistress was 8 feet tall and terrifying. The city woke up slowly around them, and somewhere in the house Gabrielle started singing to herself in her room, and Jean-Pierre's workroom light came on and the ordinary morning machinery of the world cranked into motion. And Harry Potter, 10 years old, lord of the most ancient house of Potter, sat on a garden wall in Kensington and let himself have the morning, freely and without guilt, because it was his. Chapter 5, Old Alliances. New Wars. Remus Lupin arrived at 8 in the morning looking like a man who had spent the night deciding whether or not to come and had made the decision approximately 6 times before finally arriving. He was thin in the way people are thin when they've been thin for a long time, with grey already threading through brown hair that should have been too young for it, and robes that were clean but carefully mended. He stood in the Delacour doorway and looked at Harry with an expression that did not attempt to be anything other than what it was, a complex, unguarded collision of grief and recognition and something that was trying very hard not to be hope. Harry looked back at him and felt none of the manufactured warmth he would have felt a week ago. What he felt instead was something organic and unambiguous. This was a man who had loved his parents, who was carrying an enormous amount of damage from the same events that had made Harry an orphan, and who had come here on 24 hours' notice when asked. Those were the facts. They were sufficient. "Mr. Lupin," Harry said. "Come in." Remus came in. He looked around the hallway, the books, the paintings, Gabrielle's small coat hanging on the hook 3 sizes too small for anyone else, and seemed to stabilize slightly. Familiar domesticity had that effect. Apollon had made coffee and left it in the sitting room with the tact of someone who understood that some conversations needed their own air. Etienne was there, and Jean-Pierre, and Fleur in the corner chair with her notebook. Remus sat and Harry sat across from him and didn't wait. "I need your testimony about the secret keeper switch," Harry said. "The decision to change from Sirius to Pettigrew. What you knew, when you knew it, what Dumbledore's role was." He paused. "I also need to understand the timeline around Sirius's arrest. Who told you what happened? What evidence you were given and by whom?" Remus looked at him for a moment. "You're very direct," he said. "I have about 2.5 days before we file everything at the ICW, and after that Dumbledore knows what's coming," Harry said. "I'd like to use the time well." A brief, complicated expression moved across Remus's face, grief and something warmer. "James used to say the same thing," he said quietly. Then he straightened and became precise. "All right. The Secret Keeper decision. October 1981. I was not in the room, I was not trusted completely at that point, because Pettigrew had been very effectively suggesting to James and Sirius that I might be the Order's spy. Which I was not." His jaw tightened. "But I knew about it afterward, because Sirius told me. He told me they'd switched to Peter at Dumbledore's recommendation. He seemed, not comfortable with it, but convinced it was the right call." "Dumbledore recommended Pettigrew specifically?" "Sirius said Dumbledore made the case that an unexpected secret keeper was safer. That Peter was the kind of person no one would suspect." Remus's voice was controlled, and the control was doing a lot of work. He was right about that, as it turned out. Just not in the way he claimed. Did Dumbledore know Pettigrew was the spy? The room was very quiet. Remus looked at his hands. "I have asked myself that question for 9 years," he said. "I cannot answer it with certainty. What I can tell you is that Dumbledore knew Peter was the weakest of us, intellectually, magically, psychologically. We all knew that. And he specifically recommended Peter for the role." He looked up. "Draw your own conclusions." I've drawn mine, but they are not evidence. Harry nodded. He looked at Fleur, who was writing rapidly. He looked back at Remus. The night Sirius was arrested, Harry said. What were you told? I was told by an Order member, Elphias Doge, that Sirius had betrayed James and Lily's location to Voldemort, that he had then found Peter, that Peter had confronted him, that Peter was dead along with 12 Muggles, and that Sirius was in Azkaban. Remus recited this with the flatness of something repeated internally many times. I was told this within 24 hours of the events. I was in no state to question it. James and Lily were dead. I had lost everything in 2 days. He stopped. Breathed. When I came back to myself, weeks later, and I began to think about it, I began to notice things that didn't fit. Such as? Sirius was James's secret keeper. Everyone believed that. If he'd betrayed them, he would have simply told Voldemort the location. There would be no reason for him to then find Peter. No reason for a confrontation in a public street. Remus's eyes were sharp now, the scholar's mind working. And Peter's wand. A Pettigrew family wand, pre-war purchase, registered at the ministry. It was found at the scene, but it was never tested. I was a war-trained Auror-level duelist. I found that odd. A pause. I also found it odd that Peter, who was competent but not powerful, had apparently killed 12 Muggles and faked his own death against Sirius Black, who was one of the most gifted wizards of our generation. You knew all of this, Harry said. Not accusatorially. And you didn't. I went to Dumbledore, Remus said, and the flatness was back, the careful containment. In December of 1981. I laid out my doubts. All of them. He looked at Harry directly. He told me that he understood my grief, that it was natural to look for alternative explanations when we lose people we love, and that the evidence was unambiguous. A pause. He was very kind about it. Harry looked at him. And you let it go. I was 21 years old. I was a werewolf with no job and no family left, and I had just been very gently told by the greatest wizard alive that I was wrong. Remus held his gaze. So yes. I let it go. I have not forgiven myself for that. That's not useful, Harry said. Forgiving yourself or not forgiving yourself. What's useful is what you're going to do now. He leaned forward slightly. Will you testify before the ICW tribunal? Remus looked at him for a long moment with the expression of a man making a decision he should have made a long time ago. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. I need a sworn statement first. Jean-Pierre can witness it magically. A sworn statement in your own blood carries more evidential weight than a regular affidavit. Jean-Pierre, from his chair, nodded once. One more thing, Harry said. Dumbledore told you the evidence was unambiguous. After the tribunal, and it will succeed, I need you to trust that Dumbledore will need to answer for how he handled both the Secret Keeper recommendation and the subsequent cover-up of doubt. He paused. I'm not going to ask you to testify against him on that. But I am going to ask you to be willing to speak the truth about your December 1981 conversation if asked. Remus was very still. You're going after Dumbledore. I'm going to give him the opportunity to be honest, Harry said. That's not the same thing. What he does with it is his choice. Remus studied him for a long time with those careful, analytical eyes. Then he said, "You sound like Lily," which was apparently the most significant thing he could say, and from the slight roughness in his voice it had cost him something. Harry accepted it quietly. "Let's get your statement done," he said. "And then I want to ask you about my parents. Not for the case. Just, for me." Something shifted in Remus's face. The scholar's precision gave way to something softer and more complicated. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that very much." They spent 2 hours on the sworn statement and another 2 on James and Lily Potter, which was the most important 2 hours Harry had spent yet and also the least strategic and entirely necessary. Remus talked about them the way you talk about people who are still present in you, with the specific details that only genuine memory provides. James Potter, who had been arrogant and funny and fiercely loyal, who had grown up between 17 and 21 in the way that war forces people to grow, who had kept a running list of things he wanted to teach his son. Lily Potter, who had been the most magically gifted person Remus had ever known and also the most stubborn, who had loved with the specific intensity of someone who had decided the people around her were worth everything, who had written letters to her son before he was born, knowing she was a target, knowing she might not be there. She wrote letters? Harry said. She kept a journal from about the 6th month of her pregnancy, Remus said. I don't know where it is. It may be in the Godric's Hollow house. He paused. The house was sealed after that night. It's still standing. I checked once, about 3 years ago. I couldn't go in. He looked at Harry. You could. Harry thought about the sealed house in Godric's Hollow. About a journal. About Lily Potter writing to a son she was afraid she might not see grow up, with the specific care of someone who wanted to leave something of herself behind. He filed it carefully, in the part of him that was not strategy. Tell me about the night they died, Harry said. What you know. Remus told him. Quietly, carefully, all of it, the Fidelius being broken, the neighbor who had called emergency services, the magical forensics team that had arrived to find Voldemort's body gone and a 1-year-old in the rubble who shouldn't have been alive. He told it without editorializing, and Harry listened without interrupting. When Remus finished, Harry sat with it for a moment. She put herself between me and Voldemort, Harry said. She didn't have her wand. She could have stepped aside. She was given the option. Remus's voice was very quiet. She refused. And the protection came from that. From her refusing. Old magic. Sacrifice. It's one of the oldest forms, it creates a protection that dark magic can't penetrate. Remus looked at Harry. Whatever Voldemort tried to do to you that night bounced back at him because of that protection. It destroyed his body. He's not gone. There are signs, rumors, things in the magical atmosphere that suggest he survived in some form. He paused. Dumbledore knows this too. I think it's part of why he's been so invested in managing your future. Harry thought about that. About a man who understood that Voldemort wasn't gone and had decided the solution was to shape Harry Potter into the specific weapon he thought was needed. Who had seen a 1-year-old in the rubble and thought not child but resource. He thought about it and he wasn't angry, exactly. He was something more complex and more useful than angry. Thank you, Harry said to Remus. For coming. For the statement. For all of it. Remus looked at him with those complicated eyes. He'd be so proud of you, he said. James. He'd be. He stopped. Then, with a small, genuine smile that changed his whole face, he'd also be absolutely insufferable about it. He'd tell everyone. A pause. Lily too. Though she'd express it by handing you a reading list. Harry, unexpectedly, laughed. It came out genuine and slightly surprised, and Remus's smile widened. Stay for dinner, Harry said. Apollon won't give you a choice anyway. I noticed that about her, Remus said. She reminded me of Lily. He paused. That is a very high compliment. The filing happened on day 3, exactly as planned. Ragnarok sent word at 7 in the morning that the attestation documents were complete. By 8, Etienne had the full package assembled, the Gringotts attestation covering financial misconduct, procedural violations in the serious black arrest, and the Pettigrew alive signature from 1986. Remus's sworn statement. Jean-Pierre's medical report covering the 68 compulsion charms, the illegal marriage contracts, and the evidence of physical neglect. The Potter lordship claim with its supporting documentation. The preemptive contract block filed by Fleamont Potter in 1978. Fleur's Article 47, c. Bad faith argument, formally notarized. A timeline of all cognizance suppression orders, estate access denials, and guardianship authority abuses cross-referenced against Dumbledore's official signatures. It was one of the most comprehensively documented legal filings Harry had ever read about, and he'd been reading about legal filings for a week. Claudette Beaumont at the ICW received the full package via secure magical courier at 9:15. Etienne had spoken with her 3 times in the preceding days, off the record, then formally, and she had moved from cautious interest to what Etienne described as contained fury in a progression that suggested she had found additional irregularities of her own in the British Ministry's records. Harry sat in the Delacour sitting room at 9:30 and felt the filing go, felt it the way you feel a door swing open, the change in the air. The thing that had been building for a week was now in motion in the world, outside of private rooms and quiet conversations, and the people it named would begin to know. How long before Dumbledore finds out? Harry asked. The ICW will formally notify him as a named party in the proceedings within 24 hours, Etienne said. However, he paused. In the way he paused when he was about to say something significant. I received a message from Claudette 40 minutes ago. She has invoked the ICW's Urgent Protective Measures Clause, which means the British Ministry's access to the proceeding records is restricted pending investigation. Dumbledore will be notified of his named status but will not have access to the full filing documentation through ministry channels. He'll find out through other means, Harry said. But he won't know everything we have. Correct. Harry looked at the window. The London morning was grey and certain. The marriage contract families have been notified? Simultaneously with the ICW filing, yes. Each family received a formal notice of void challenge citing the 3 grounds, unilateral filing, bad faith, and fraudulent guardian authority, along with a private letter offering quiet dissolution in exchange for a formal waiver of claim. The letter gives them 48 hours to respond. Etienne paused. I have already had 2 responses. Which families? Bones and Abbott, both within the hour. Both accepting quiet dissolution. He almost smiled. Amelia Bones apparently said, and I am paraphrasing her response to the ministry's notification desk, that she had not been aware of any such contract and whoever had filed it without her knowledge could expect to hear from her legal team before the week was out. Harry thought that Amelia Bones sounded like someone worth knowing. The Macmillan family? Fleur asked from her corner. No response yet, but I expect it shortly. They are politically pragmatic. Etienne sat back. The dark-aligned families, Knott, Yaxley, Crabbe, Goyle, will not respond within 48 hours. They will attempt to retain legal representation and contest the filing. That's fine, Harry said. The bad faith argument on those 4 is the strongest we have. Dumbledore's documented interest in controlling their Wisengamot votes through marriage alliance is in the filing. When that becomes public record through the tribunal proceedings, those families won't want to be associated with a failed illegal contract attempt. The PR damage will do half the work. You've been thinking about the dark-aligned families, Fleur said. All week. Harry looked at her. The Knotts and Yaxleys of the world have political interests in keeping things quiet too. They don't want a public tribunal any more than I want a prolonged fight. The trick is making sure they understand that the public tribunal is absolutely what happens if they contest. You are 10 years old, Fleur said. She was almost smiling. You can stop saying that at any point, Harry said, which made her actually smile, brief and genuine. The flue in the entrance hall flared green, and all 3 of them looked toward the hallway. Apollin's voice came from the kitchen, Etienne. It's Augusta. Etienne was on his feet. Come, he said to Harry. This is important. Augusta Longbottom came through the flue in robes that were formal without being ostentatious and with the bearing of a woman who had been a significant figure in wizarding society for 40 years and was entirely accustomed to being the most imposing person in any room. She was tall, gray-haired, with sharp eyes and the particular composure of old blood families, the kind that didn't shake under pressure because it had been trained not to. She looked around the Delacour sitting room, looked at Etienne, looked at Harry, and settled on Harry with the assessing attention of someone who had been given a description and was comparing it to reality. "You're small," she said. "People keep noting that," Harry said. "It's not a criticism. I was told you were conducting yourself with considerable competence for someone your age." She sat, without being invited, which was not rudeness but authority. "I've reviewed the filing. Claudette Beaumont sent me a summary this morning. She and I have been corresponding about the British Ministry irregularities for some time." Augusta set her hands in her lap. "I have several things to say." "Please," Harry said. "My daughter-in-law and son were attacked by Bellatrix Lestrange and Bartemius Crouch Jr. 4 years ago," Augusta said. "They are both alive but, they are not themselves. They have been in St. Mungo's for 4 years. Her voice was absolutely level and it cost her something. "Bartemius Crouch Jr. was sentenced to Azkaban. He is still there. The trial was proper and the conviction is sound." She paused. "I mention this because I have significant personal reasons to want the Ministry's wartime judicial processes examined carefully, and what you have filed provides a framework for that examination." Harry looked at her steadily. "I understand. I also have 2 Wisengamot votes, the Longbottom seat and my late husband's sponsored seat," she said. "The Potter family holds 2 seats. If the Potter seats have been exercised by proxy under the guardianship authority, which I suspect they have, those votes will need to be reclaimed and the decisions reviewed." She met Harry's eyes. "Combined with the Bones votes, Amelia holds 2 seats as well and she is furious. I spoke to her an hour ago, and several other families who have been quietly uncomfortable with certain decisions under Dumbledore's Chief Warlock tenure. We have sufficient votes to challenge and if necessary remove him from the Chief Warlock position." Harry sat with that. "On what grounds?" "Abuse of institutional authority," Augusta said crisply. "Conflict of interest in proceedings that directly involved his ward. Financial misconduct. The grounds are well documented in your filing." She paused. "I want to be clear about something. I am not doing this because I want Dumbledore disgraced. I am doing this because the Wisengamot needs to function properly. He has been using it as a personal instrument for too long, and the magical governance of this country has suffered for it." She looked at Harry. "Do you understand the difference?" "Yes," Harry said. "You're fixing the institution, not punishing the person." "Precisely." Augusta looked satisfied. "Though the punishing of the person may be a side effect." "What do you need from me?" "Your endorsement. Politically, your name as Lord Potter behind a formal motion carries significant weight. You are the largest individual holder of hereditary Wisengamot standing currently active, and you are the wronged party in the filing. Your endorsement of the institutional reform motion makes it politically untenable to oppose." She paused. "I am not asking you to be political. I am asking you to allow your name to mean what it should mean." Harry looked at the lordship ring on his finger. He thought about his grandfather Fleamont, who had filed a preemptive block in 1978 because he understood that his family's name was a target. He thought about his father's letter, about using what you have for what's right. "You have my endorsement," he said. "Conditional on one thing." Augusta raised an eyebrow. "Oh." "The motion includes a review of all wartime emergency detentions," Harry said. "Anyone imprisoned under the same provision as Sirius Black. Full judicial review." Augusta looked at him for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression, not surprise, but the specific recognition of someone who has found a kindred thing. "That was my second agenda item," she said. I am pleased to see we are thinking along the same lines. Neville's parents, Harry said quietly. If the review finds anything that opens avenues for treatment, for recovery, I want to make sure the review covers all angles. Augusta's expression did something complicated. The composure held but only barely, and the eyes were very bright for a moment. That, she said, after a brief pause that cost her something, is very kind. It's practical, Harry said, because he thought she'd prefer that framing. A proper review covers everything. It would be incomplete not to. Augusta looked at him for a moment more. Then she stood, with the decisive movement of someone who has accomplished what they came to accomplish. I will have the motion formally drafted by end of week, she said. Etienne, I will need the ICW cross-reference documentation. I'll have it to you tomorrow, Etienne said. At the door, she paused. Looked back at Harry. Your grandmother Euphemia Potter was a friend of mine, she said. She would have found you satisfactory. Which was, from the tone, approximately the highest compliment in Augusta Longbottom's register. High praise, Harry said. The corner of Augusta's mouth moved. Don't push it, she said, and left. The response from the dark-aligned families came not in writing but in person, which was either boldness or miscalculation. Harry was in Jean-Pierre's workroom. The healer was running a one-week post-ritual scan, checking the ceiling, confirming that the magical architecture was settling correctly, when Etienne knocked and opened the door with the expression of someone who had found something mildly interesting on his doorstep. Theonat Sr. is in the entrance hall, he said. With his solicitor. Jean-Pierre looked up from his instruments. Harry got off the examination table. Let him wait 5 minutes, he said. Then show him in. He went upstairs and changed into the cleanest set of clothes he had, which were not his own but had been purchased quietly by Apollon 2 days ago with the same decisive efficiency she applied to everything. They fit properly, which was so novel that he still noticed it. He put the lordship ring on deliberately and went to the sitting room. Theodore Knott Sr. was a lean man in his 40s with the kind of face that had been handsome once and had narrowed into something harder. He stood in the middle of the sitting room with a solicitor behind him and an expression carefully calibrated to project authority. He looked at Harry and blinked, just once, the slight recalibration of someone expecting something different. Harry sat down. He did not invite them to. Lord Potter, Knott said, after a beat. I thought it would be useful to speak directly rather than through correspondence. It might be, Harry said. Say what you came to say. The solicitor shifted slightly. Knott's calibrated expression adjusted again. He had clearly expected to manage this conversation. Harry had decided on his way down the stairs that no one was managing this conversation except him. The contract between House Knott and House Potter, Knott said. My family entered that agreement in good faith through the appropriate channels. We believe the challenge is, you entered the agreement with Albus Dumbledore, not with House Potter, Harry said. You know that. He doesn't have the authority to bind my family to matrimonial contracts unilaterally. That's not ambiguous, it's in the 1962 convention, it's in the pre-existing block filed by my grandfather, and it's in approximately 8 separate provisions of the Wisengamot's own hereditary succession code. He paused. You're not here because you think the contract is valid. You're here because you want to know what it costs to make this go away quietly. Knott looked at him. The solicitor looked at the floor. The 48-hour window is still open, Harry said. You sign the dissolution waiver, the contract is voided, and it stays out of the public record. That's the offer. He met Knott's eyes. If you contest it and go to tribunal, the full filing becomes public record. That includes the documentation of why Dumbledore contracted you specifically, which is that he wanted to control your Wisengamot votes through my marriage alliance. That becomes a matter of public record about your family's political maneuvering. He paused. I imagine that's not ideal. Knott was very still. Sign the waiver, Harry said. Today. You are 10 years old, the solicitor said, apparently unable to help himself. Harry looked at him. I am also Lord of the most ancient House of Potter, which holds 2 Wisengamot seats, active Gringotts lordship recognition, and an ongoing ICW proceeding in which your client is a named party. He looked back at Nott. The age is a detail. The rest of it is real. Nott studied him for a long moment with the particular attention of someone who has just revised their assessment of a situation entirely. Then he looked at his solicitor. Then back at Harry. I'll have the waiver signed by this evening, he said. Good, Harry said. I'll show you out. He did. They went, and Harry closed the door behind them, and Fleur was on the stairs with her arms crossed and an expression that contained a very precisely controlled amount of amusement. That was well done, she said. He was going to contest it, Harry said. Until he did the math. You made the math very clear. That was the idea. Harry looked at the door. How many left? Yaxley, Crabbe, and Goyle. The Macmillan dissolution came through while you were in with Jean-Pierre. Greengrass, Davis, and Folly responded this morning, all accepting. Fleur came down the stairs. Flint sent a very rude letter. What did it say? Various things about your parentage and the audacity of minor children attempting to dissolve noble contracts. She paused. Papa sent a response. What did his response say? It was 5 lines. It cited 4 separate ICW statutes and ended with a sentence that was technically polite and functionally threatening. Fleur's expression was serene. Flint has not replied yet. Harry almost laughed. Etienne is good at that. He is excellent at that, she agreed, with the specific satisfaction of a daughter who appreciates her father's skills. The owl came at dusk. It was a magnificent bird, silver-white, large, with eyes the particular amber of old honey. It landed on the sitting-room windowsill and regarded Harry with an expression suggesting it was accustomed to being the most impressive thing in any room it entered. Harry untied the letter. The seal was Hogwarts. The handwriting inside was neat and slightly cramped and belonged to someone who wrote many letters and had developed a very efficient script. Dear Harry, it has come to my attention through the usual channels that you have been away from your registered address and in the care of different adults for the past several days. I write simply to ensure that all is well with you and to offer my assistance should you require it. I confess I have also been made aware through official channels of certain proceedings at the ICW. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you directly at your earliest convenience. I believe there are things I can explain that would provide important context, and I would not want decisions of this magnitude to be made without the benefit of that context. I remain, as always, entirely at your disposal. Albus Dumbledore. Harry read it twice. Then he set it on the table and looked at it with the same clean, flat attention he gave to things that required assessment. He knows, Harry said. Apollon had appeared in the doorway. Yes, she said. He received the ICW notification at noon. He says he wants to explain, Harry said. Provide context. He will be very warm about it, Apollon said. Very reasonable. He will find the version of events in which everything he did was for your protection. I know. Harry looked at the letter. He thought about the charm that had been at his left temple, the one that made him defer to authority, that blurred his assessment of mentor figures, that made him want to believe in the warm old man who knew best. The charm that was gone now, leaving clean space. He thought about what Remus had said, he told me I was wrong. He was very kind about it. He thought about his father's letter. About 68 compulsion charms placed before his first birthday. About 500,000 galleons quietly removed from a family vault. About a godfather in Azkaban for 9 years with 3 pages of documentation. He picked up a quill. Dear Professor Dumbledore, thank you for your letter. I am well. I am aware that you have been notified of the ICW proceedings and the associated filings. I want to be transparent with you, the scope of the documentation is complete. There is no avenue of contest that will be productive. I am willing to meet with you. I would find that conversation useful, and I believe you would too. However, the meeting will take place after the tribunal proceedings have concluded, and it will take place on my terms. I will be in touch. Harry J. Potter Lord, House of Potter. He handed it to the silver owl, which looked at him with those amber eyes and then launched itself off the windowsill into the evening. Apollon read over his shoulder. She was quiet for a moment. Brief, she said. He doesn't need more than that, Harry said. He knows what it means. What does it mean? It means I know everything and I'm not afraid of him and I'm giving him the chance to respond correctly. Harry looked at the darkening window. The question is whether he takes it. Apollon was quiet. Then, and if he doesn't? Then the Wisengamot motion proceeds, the chief warlock position is challenged, the financial misconduct goes to criminal prosecution, and everything he's done is public record. Harry paused. He's not stupid. He'll know that. He is also not someone who relinquishes control easily, Apollon said. Even when the logic for it is overwhelming. No, Harry agreed. But even Dumbledore has to do arithmetic eventually. 2 days later, Yaxley's solicitor delivered the signed dissolution waiver. Crabbe and Goyle, apparently communicating with each other and arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously, delivered theirs the following morning. Flint's came last, attached to a letter that was considerably less rude than the first, and Harry set the complete set of 12 dissolution waivers in a folder and gave them to Ragnarok, who filed them with the ICW Contracts Tribunal with the satisfaction of a man finishing a piece of work he'd been hired for. 12 contracts. Gone. The Sirius Black Wrongful Imprisonment Tribunal was formally opened by the ICW the same day, with Claudette Beaumont as presiding arbitrator. The British Ministry's objection to ICW jurisdiction was filed within hours and dismissed within the same day on the grounds that the procedural violations in the original detention made standard ministry jurisdiction inapplicable, a ruling that made the front page of the Daily Prophet the following morning and caused what Etienne described, with understated satisfaction, as considerable noise. Remus's testimony was delivered under oath before Beaumont and 2 additional arbitrators. He was precise and thorough and clearly had been preparing for 9 years. Ragnarok's attestation was submitted in person, which was unusual and significant. Goblins rarely gave personal testimony in wizarding legal proceedings, and Beaumont apparently spent 30 minutes reading the attestation line by line before formally entering it into the record. Sirius's wand came out of Azkaban property storage on day 4 of the tribunal. The magical forensic examiner, an ICW-appointed independent, not a ministry examiner, tested it in front of the tribunal panel. The wand's history showed dueling spells, defensive magic, the Patronus charm cast repeatedly over many years. No killing curse. No mass destruction curse. Nothing that corresponded to the scene description in the 3-page arrest document. Nothing. The examiner's report was 16 pages long and contained the phrase "no evidence consistent with the charged conduct" in its summary section, underlined. Harry was at the townhouse when Etienne brought the report home. He read the summary section, set it down, and sat quietly for a moment. 12 contracts dissolved. Tribunal proceedings underway. Wand clear. He thought about Sirius in that grey cell, with the watery light from the book-sized window, saying "I've thought about this for 9 years. About the specific kind of endurance required to hold on to your own mind in a place designed to take it." "How long until the ruling?" Harry asked. "Beaumont says a week, perhaps less. The evidence is," she described it as overwhelming. Etienne set the report on the table. "Harry. There is something else." Harry looked at him. Dumbledore has not contested the tribunal proceedings. He received notification of named status, and his response through his solicitor was, Etienne paused, choosing his words. He has not submitted any counter-evidence. He has not objected to the jurisdiction ruling. He has not contacted the tribunal panel. A pause. His only action has been to contact the Ministry's Magical Guardian Registry and formally relinquish his guardianship authority over you. The room was quiet. He relinquished it, Harry said. Voluntarily. Before the ruling. Before the chief warlock motion. Before anything was forced. Etienne looked at him carefully. I think he is reading the situation correctly. Harry thought about that. About a man who had spent decades certain of his own righteousness, making the calculation that this particular fight was unwinnable and that the most he could do was control how it ended. He thought about the letter. I believe there are things I can explain that would provide important context, and about what context could possibly be provided, and about whether he believed Dumbledore was capable of genuine accounting or only of the kind of explanation that was really justification dressed in warm language. He didn't know yet. That was the honest answer. He didn't know. I'll see him after the tribunal, Harry said. After Sirius is free. Etienne nodded. He picked up the report. Then he said, quietly, your parents would be, don't, Harry said. Not harshly. I know. And I need to not think about that part right now or I won't be useful. Etienne was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded again, with the understanding of a man who had learned when to stop talking. Of course, he said. Harry looked at the folder with 12 dissolution waivers in it, sitting on the corner of the table. He looked at the report on Sirius's wand. He looked at the ring on his finger. Then he picked up his notebook and went back to work.